Chapter 2899. Xiaoyang sensed that the moment they left the Inflame world, the Inflame spirit appeared and watched them leave. In fact, Xiaoyang also knew that the Inflame spirit did not have a good impression of them. This time, it came to see them off with suspicion. It might just be to confirm whether they left or not. After all, Xiaoyang's massacre had directly caused the Inflame world to lose 2/3 of its top fighting force. How could they still have the so-called friendship? The Inflame spirit's reason for fully cooperating with Xiaoyang was very obvious. It was to help the situation it wanted to see. If Mingjun won, the falling flame mountain would probably be destroyed as well. At that time, the Inflame world would once again fall into chaos. At that time, even if Nanhong was lucky enough to survive, it would be difficult for her to unify the Inflame world in the next few hundred years. However, the fallen flame mountain was different. As the only surviving member of the three major forces, they had the absolute right to speak. They could quell the internal strife in the shortest time possible and even achieve a great unification. Even for the current fallen flame mountain, it would be very difficult for them to unify the Inflame world under such circumstances. It would be difficult to achieve in a short period of time. Even though they were world spirits, they also needed some hope. Only this could drive them to go further. If they were at a loss at a glance, it would be chilling. What's wrong? Princess Mingzhu saw that something was wrong and asked. Xiaoyang smiled and shook his head. Nothing. Just an old friend sending me off. Princess Mingzhu was stunned for a moment. They were enemies everywhere in the Inflame world. So how could they possibly have any friends? Even the mountain lord of the fallen flame mountain, Ping Chunsheng, they only cooperated because of benefits. How could they be considered friends? Since Xiaoyang did not say, Princess Mingzhu was not in the mood to ask. However, Princess Mingzhu had gained a lot from this trip to the Inflame world. Although she had forcefully broken through in the Battle of the Fire Union, causing it to be very difficult, she had become more stable after the battle with Mingjun. Although fighting was not the only way to stabilize one's realm, it was the fastest way. If it was done properly, then many suspicious points would be easily solved and would no longer exist. Looking at the vast river of stars, Princess Mingzhu smiled bitterly. It seemed that after coming to the middle world, there were not many peaceful days. They had been constantly rushing about and fighting for survival. At this point, everything could finally be considered to have come to an end. However, this did not make them completely relax. After all, there was no telling what kind of difficulties awaited them next. Compared to those small worlds, the smoke and flames of war between the 3,000 medium worlds were way stronger. When he was in the small world, he had enough resources and providence, so there were not many conflicts. However, it was still the same in the middle world. However, the hearts of the people no longer felt that it was enough, which meant that it was not enough. Naturally, it was inevitable that they would start a war with each other. Thinking about these problems, Princess Mingzhu felt a headache coming on. If she were to rule over the god realm in the future, then these problems would naturally be unavoidable and she would have to face them. The more he thought about it, the more his head hurt. He didn't know when these days would end. Xiaoyang appeared to be very indifferent. Since this matter had come to an end, there was naturally no need to think too much about it. As for those hidden dangers, he could just completely put them down. When the boat reached the bridge head, it would cross the bridge. When the time came when the Luoyan mountain received all the reparations, they would probably have very little contact with the Inflame world in the future. These things were not things that he could care about at the moment. Xiaoyang was very open-minded now. Right now, raising his strength was the most important thing. As long as one's fist was strong enough, no matter how strong the opponent was, they would be able to fight it out. If one's skills were not as good as others, then there would be no way out. As for the attitude of the sect behind Mingjun, Xiaoyang did not take it to heart. As long as his strength could continue to increase, when they came, he would be able to deal with them. Moreover, if it was in the flowing cloud world, as long as the other party did not invade on a large scale, then this was something that Xiaoyang could deal with. In fact, he was very confident. These things were now unknown, and no one could say for sure. After thinking for a long time, Xiaoyang collected his mind and entered a very mysterious state of meditation. After a series of battles in the Myriad Beast World and Yin Flame World, Xiaoyang had completely reached the peak of rank 5, and there was even a situation of overflowing water. However, he had been unable to take this step, which made him very depressed. The journey back to the flowing cloud world was long and would take a long time, so he also wanted to give it a try to see if it was enough to break through. If he could break through to rank 6, coupled with the help of the world spirit, he really would not be afraid of anyone in the battle in the flowing cloud world. At least under rank 8, there would be few opponents. However, this was only an idea. Whether or not he could take this step was still unknown. The bottleneck of this realm had lasted for a long time, and it was not easy to break through. After meditating, Xiaoyang also felt that breaking through was just a fine line, but after waiting for a long time, he did not feel anything. Logically speaking, in terms of experience, Xiaoyang was not bad. Everything should be like pushing a boat with the current, and success would follow naturally. However, he kept feeling that something was missing, just a little bit more, and he was unable to take another step. Seeing that Xiaoyang was breaking through, Princess Mingzhu casually set up a few restrictions to avoid being disturbed. Of course, because of the war between the Myriad Beast World and Yin Flame World, and many unforeseen events, there were very few cultivators on this road. However, it was better to be careful than to sail a boat for 10,000 years, lest some blind people came to die. Princess Mingzhu did not care whether they died or not, but if they disturbed Xiaoyang's breakthrough, then this problem would be big and serious. After a few days of impact, Xiaoyang could only helplessly withdraw in the end. What difficulties did you encounter? Princess Mingzhu asked curiously. She understood Xiaoyang very well and felt that his breakthrough should not be difficult. But this time he failed. That would be thought-provoking and pondering. Xiaoyang shook his head and said, I am not sure either. I don't know where the problem is. Princess Mingzhu was also helpless. If there was a problem, they could discuss and solve it together. However, if they didn't know where the problem was, then this matter would really become illusory and difficult to determine. Chapter 2900. When the news of Xiaoyang and the others' victory reached the Four-Realm Alliance, almost everyone began to cheer excitedly. Firstly, it was because they had finally gotten their revenge for the injuries they had suffered before. They wanted the culprits to pay with their blood. Their comrades who had died in that disaster could also rest in peace. Secondly, they could avoid a war and chaos. If they did not succeed, the Four-Realm Alliance would have to face the invasion of the Yin Flame Realm's army. At that time, who could stop them? At that time, the Four-Realm Alliance would be in mourning. There would be dead people everywhere. Many people would even become slaves. They would no longer have freedom. Fortunately, Xiaoyang, Princess Mingzhu, and Bai Jian joined hands and turned the tide. They stopped these disasters outside. With the defeat of the Thousand Beast Realm and Yin Flame Realm, the surrounding realms would not dare to have any evil thoughts in the future. If they wanted to make a move on the Four-Realm Alliance, they must be prepared to pay the price. The Yin Flame Realm was a living example. This news made Luo Ji of the Sun Snow Realm the happiest. His neighboring realms looked friendly, but in many contacts they were more or less overbearing. At that time, the Four-Realm Alliance was in turmoil. Under the serious situation of foreign invasion, Luo Ji could only endure it. At that time, if the Four-Realm Alliance was attacked from 3 sides, the final result would be destruction. However, the situation was different now. Even if they had some evil thoughts, they would have to think twice after knowing this. At the same time, Luo Ji was also very helpless. The other 3 realms had powerful young experts. Although Luo Rong was not bad, with the strength of a 3rd-level martial king, he could be said to be an outstanding young talent. However, compared to people like Xiaoyang and Bai Jian, he was far behind. As the saying goes, One step slower, one step slower. The divine realm slowly recovered its previous auspicious atmosphere. Those broken places also gradually began to be repaired, especially when the divine emperor participated in the Battle of the Fire Union. It made everyone feel more at ease. There was no such thing as 100 things waiting to be done in the God realm. They had always seemed to be flourishing. Even after the battle with the Inflame realm, it recovered to its original state in the shortest amount of time. The only thing missing was those experts. Li Fengmu, who was in the Sword Heart realm, was very open-minded. He did not deliberately give orders to repair the destroyed areas. It was as if he did not care about anything and let them perish on their own. Ever since Bai Jian had returned, Li Fengmu had gone into seclusion. He had left everything to the youngsters to handle. Bai Jian was also someone who did not care about anything, so all the heavy responsibilities fell on Li Chuni's shoulders. Although he had the help of many seniors, it was still very tiring for him to make decisions on many important matters. As for the atmosphere of the Flowing Cloud realm, it was a little strange. Their system was quite similar to that of the God realm, and it was very complete. But now they were in a state where there were many things waiting to be done. It was very difficult to see anyone anywhere. Most of the younger generation had entered seclusion. Sun Yukai, the ruler of the Flowing Cloud world, was very clear that the most important thing now was the number of experts. If there were no experts overseeing it, no matter how beautiful the cities and sects were, it would be useless and could only be looked at. As long as there were enough powerhouses to guard it, these things would naturally be the icing on the cake. Do you want to provide timely assistance? Most likely, it would not be that useful. Following the return of King Zhao and Sun Dishing, the news of Xiaoyang killing a rank 7 expert in the Falling Flame Mountain spread, and it made people extremely excited. Immediately, all the cultivators in the Flowing Cloud world seemed to have eaten a calming pill. They no longer had those worries from before. Instead, they became extremely confident. With Xiaoyang, this godlike leader, with him around, what problem could not be solved? Especially those youngsters who revered Xiaoyang. They had even reached a fanatical level. Many people wanted to join the Northern Light City in order to be a little closer to their idol. But unfortunately, the number of disciples recruited by the Northern Light City every year was very limited. If one's talent was not enough, then there was nothing they could do. The core people of the Flowing Cloud world were all sitting together now. When they heard Sun Dishing say that they did not have a share in this sum of compensation, they all frowned slightly. Although Sun Dishing had also said that Xiaoyang had taken away the raging river and 1 mountain and 9 peaks, they had never seen them and did not know what these 2 blessed lands were like. They also believed in Xiaoyang's vision, but a small portion of them couldn't help but feel that it was a little lacking. After all, it was still a little awkward to not have actual benefits in their hands. However, since this matter had already been decided by Xiaoyang, it was already set in stone. Naturally, there was no need to cling on to it. It was better to be open-minded. This guy has never disappointed anyone. The ancestor of the Xiao family, Xiao Chongsheng, stroked his beard very proudly and smiled. Xiaoyang was a descendant of the Xiao family. As the ancestor, he naturally benefited from this. Chu Taiyin only smiled faintly. He also did not want to say anything. The current Xiaoyang was no longer the Xiaoyang of the Xiao family, but the Xiaoyang of the entire Flowing Cloud world. According to the Lord's intentions, we can send some disciples out to train in batches. Sun Dishing frowned slightly and said, Xiaoyang had also mentioned this matter before. The current situation was still relatively stable, so some policies could naturally be opened up. If all the disciples were to train behind closed doors in their own worlds, their progress would probably be very slow. As for the other 3 worlds, when their worlds were closed, they had already traveled to each other. It could be said that it was during that time that the relationship between the 4 realms became so strong. Mu Yang nodded and said, "That's good. However, the surrounding worlds are not good people. What are you afraid of? You've already planned everything. Aren't you a flower in a greenhouse?" Chu Taiying retorted. In an instant, everyone had their own opinions and did not stop talking. On the way back, Xiaoyang tried to break through many times, but in the end, it all ended in failure. Now that he was in the flowing cloud world, he could only resentfully withdraw. Since he could not force it, there was no need to force it. The time was not right, so he could only continue to wait. Breaking through to a new realm was like this. Sometimes, because of a lack of comprehension or opportunity, one would be unable to advance. This was also why many powerhouses were unable to advance further. If they could not find the flaw and fix it, it would be difficult to advance. Do you want to go down and sit? Xiaoyang did not want to think about this anymore and asked with a smile. Chapter 2901. Princess Ming Zhu smiled and shook her head. Then, she steered the flying ship towards the God Realm. She also had many things that she wanted to consult her father about, so it wouldn't be good to delay for too long. After alighting from the flying ship, Xiaoyang didn't make any noise. Instead, he quietly returned to his little courtyard. Lying on the familiar rattan chair and rocking slightly, Xiaoyang muttered in satisfaction, "Comfortable!" Only when he was lying here could Xiaoyang completely relax. In the outside world, no matter what, he had to be extra careful to guard against many possibilities. But here he didn't need to. The Northern Light City had been run for many years. Many of the arrangements here were personally made by him. Even if there were some variables, they wouldn't be too big. He would be able to detect them immediately. After lying down, Xiaoyang also began to review the game one by one. Using this method, he checked and patched up the loopholes to see if he had missed anything. Perhaps the opportunity for his breakthrough was hidden in that small detail. But these things were difficult to explain clearly. He could only hope to find some clues. Wanting to comprehend all these problems wasn't an easy task. There were many difficulties. Although Xiaoyang was anxious, he was also clear that he had to take it step by step. If he made a mistake because of his impatience, it might cause his great Tao to change. While reviewing, Xiaoyang also felt a little tired. Unknowingly, he fell asleep. During this period of time, Xiaoyang was very tired. He was always on the verge of exhaustion, but he was very clear that he absolutely couldn't relax in the slightest. In the Inflame world, or in the endless galaxy, accidents could happen. Enemies everywhere. That kind of feeling wasn't good. At the very beginning, if the three of them wanted to destroy two great forces, they would definitely have to use up all their tricks and schemes. Just this point alone caused the exhaustion of their mental strength to be extremely terrifying. Not long after, a hint of excitement flashed by Xiaoyang's side. A woman wearing a flowing dress appeared. She helplessly shook her head as she looked at Xiaoyang, who had already fallen asleep. With a wave of her hand, specks of white light sprinkled down and landed on Xiaoyang's body. Looking at the sleeping man, who appeared extremely haggard, the woman shook her head helplessly. She was very clearly aware that if it wasn't for him fighting bravely, then Drift Cloud World would have probably fallen into enemy hands now. And how could it have such a good life now? The reason why everything was so calm was because he had shouldered all the hardships by himself. Lu Yin shook her head with a bitter smile. She felt that she had never been good at judging people. The people he thought highly of all seemed to have betrayed the flowing cloud world. On the other hand, this person, who he didn't think highly of from the start, was doing his best to protect the flowing cloud realm. In fact, after returning this time, he was so exhausted that he fell into a deep sleep. How could one not be moved by such a thing? Then, Lu Yin disappeared on the spot. As the spirit of the world, she couldn't show herself for too long. After all, the North Light City was filled with crouching tigers and hidden dragons. If they found out something was wrong, then it would be bad. Once too many people knew about it, and if someone accidentally revealed it, then the secret would no longer be a secret and the risk would increase exponentially. If that was the case, then what should she do? She knew what was more important and what was more important. Xiaoyang only felt that his sleep was very comfortable. It had been a long time since he felt so relaxed. It could be said that after the continuous battles and the terrifying situation, his heartstrings had been stretched taut. Luckily, everything was finally over, and he didn't need to waste too much of his energy. When Xiaoyang woke up, the first person he saw was Xiaoman. Xiaoman sat on the side obediently, but the anxiety in her eyes couldn't be hidden. "Young master, you're finally awake," Xiaoman said excitedly. After Xiaoman realized that the young master had returned, she had been guarding him by his side. "How long have I been asleep?" Xiaoyang frowned and asked suspiciously. He was reviewing what happened before and unknowingly fell asleep. Seeing how anxious this girl was, it must have been a long time. "It's been 9 days since Lil Man found you," Lil Man said honestly. Hearing this, Xiaoyang frowned slightly. Why was he in a deep sleep for such a long time? Then he felt that the internal injuries in his body had healed. He shook his head and bitterly smiled. He knew the reason. The master and servant met again, and Xiaoman told him what happened during this time. Most of all, Xiaoman needed to talk about the feelings in her heart. Xiaoyang listened patiently. Xiaoman was now a powerhouse of the Martial King realm, but her heart hadn't changed. It was as if this little girl was still the same as when he was in dire straits back then. The only difference was that their status had undergone an earth-shattering change. Ever since Xiaoyang came to the upper realm, they spent less and less time together. Although Xiaoman came to the upper realm later on, Xiaoyang had been running around outside because of the flowing cloud realm's promotion and safety. Xiaoman could only stay in Northern Light City because she wasn't strong enough. Every time Xiaoyang went out to battle, it was filled with danger. He couldn't pay attention to Xiaoman all the time. Moreover, he was often in a state where he couldn't even protect himself. It was easier said than done to take care of another person. "By the way, young master, my sister also came to the upper realm a few days ago," Xiaoman said excitedly. Xiaoyang was stunned for a moment. Then he remembered that when he ascended to the upper realm, Xiaolian was already Wu Zun level 7. With her talent, it was naturally not a problem for her to ascend to the upper realm. "Very good," Xiaoyang continued with a smile. "You can have a companion in the future." Most of the time, Xiaoman cultivated alone in this courtyard. Even though there were many old friends here, most of them had their own matters to attend to, so they rarely gathered together. Xiaoman just smiled, and her mood looked very strange. "Young master, are you not going to take me with you when you go out in the future?" Xiaoman was very depressed. Xiaoyang was stunned for a moment. He didn't expect this girl to be thinking about this. "Of course not. The next time I go out, I'll take you with me." Xiaoyang smiled. Xiaoman was now a level 2 martial king, so it wasn't bad. Of course, the most important thing was the breakthrough of the mountain river map. If the situation was bad, he could put Xiaoman in it. He could even send her directly to the flowing cloud realm. This way he would have no worries. Chapter 2902. After exchanging some small talk, Lil Man left. Xiaoman knew very well that her young master was no longer the young master who only wanted to become stronger. Today he was the ruler of the flowing cloud boundary. There were many things he had to worry about. He was related to the survival of the entire flowing cloud boundary. Xiaoyang laughed helplessly when he saw that the silly lass was still considerate of others in all aspects. These years, because of the flowing cloud boundary, he had neglected her, but there was nothing he could do. Time was limited, but there were many things he had to worry about. This was also when Xiaoyang had the help of many people. The internal affairs were managed by the 2 heroes of the Sun clan. Other things were helped by Mu Yang, Chu Taiyin, and the others. That was how the flowing cloud boundary was today. To the development of the flowing cloud boundary, Xiaoyang had contributed a lot, but others had contributed a lot as well. If not for their efforts, it would have been impossible for Xiaoyang to revitalize the entire world with his own strength. Then, Xiaoyang sent a message to Sun Dishing and the others to gather all the core people in the North Light City to discuss some things. Very quickly, Xiaoyang received a reply. Because some people had things they couldn't do, They would discuss it again in 3 days when everyone was free. The 2 heroes of the Sun clan were very reliable in this matter. They only needed one instruction, and they could arrange everything properly. Now that the war had ended, there was no such thing as urgent. Therefore, even if they slowed down for a few days, it wouldn't matter. Xiao Yang stood up. At the same time, he began to ponder. After all, what he needed to do next would greatly change the entire flowing cloud boundary. Therefore, he still needed to think carefully about what to do next. Then, Xiao Yang stood up and headed to the middle peak. What he was thinking about now was the placement of the 9 peaks and the Furious River. Since he had spent so much effort to get it, he wanted it to become a fortress, the most solid line of defense for the flowing cloud boundary. However, whether or not it was suitable for use still needed to be investigated many times. Even with the convenience given by the world spirit, Xiao Yang could sense the entire world with just a thought. However, that was just a feeling. On such an important matter, Xiao Yang did not dare to be careless. Naturally, he had to consider many aspects. After all, there was no telling how to deal with these additional blessed lands. It was easy to put it up, but it was hard to say whether it would cause a chain reaction. Therefore, how could Xiao Yang not be worried? Furthermore, these things were not something that could be explained in a few words. Most of the time, it only seemed appropriate, but without careful investigation and verification, who knew what would happen? If he acted rashly, it would only bring about a lot of trouble. In addition, the Flame world's environment was very different from the flowing cloud world. Compatibility and rejection were all factors that needed to be considered. After arriving at the middle peak, Xiao Yang looked around but didn't see any big mountains. It was a bit funny that the middle peak didn't have any giant mountains. In the past, there was indeed a huge mountain in the middle peak, but it disappeared due to a calamity. Looking at the flowers and grass all over the mountains, Xiao Yang smiled in satisfaction. During this period of time, Xiao Yang had been working hard to restore the vitality of the middle peak. He had put in a lot of spiritual plants here, but because the spiritual energy here had dried up, it was hard for them to survive. Therefore, he could only use spirit flowers and spirit herbs to nourish this place, using this method to restore vitality to this place. Even after Xiao Yang left, Sun Dishing and the others didn't give up on this place. They also did their best to manage it. Now that they could see some vitality here, they were very happy. When the time comes, if he placed the 9 peaks here, he would have to give up most of the spiritual plants. However, there was still a huge difference between these spirit plants and the 1 mountain and 9 peaks. How to choose was still a problem. Moreover, in order to obtain these 2 blessed lands, Xiao Yang had given up on compensation. This wasn't a joke. If he didn't succeed, he would only obtain 2 good magic treasures. In the flowing cloud realm, there would be nothing. Walking in the middle peak, Xiao Yang would occasionally meet some disciples. Most of them were people sent by the Northern Light City to protect the spiritual plants here. After seeing Xiao Yang, they all bowed and were indescribably excited. The current Xiao Gongzhu was a godlike existence in the flowing cloud world. If it wasn't for him, how could there be the flowing cloud realm today? Xiao Yang's great achievements for the flowing cloud realm couldn't be recorded by a stone tablet. Not to mention the series of events that happened after the flowing cloud world was promoted from a small world to a medium world. Just calming the invasion of the demon world could be said to be unprecedented, freeing them from the abyss of suffering. Xiao Yang would also greet them in a friendly manner, but most of the time it was just a smile. Even though the disciples were excited and wanted to interact with their idol more, seeing that Lord Xiao seemed to have other things to do, they didn't dare to disturb him. After all, what Lord Xiao was worried about was a big matter for the flowing cloud realm. How could it be affected by one person's mood? Everyone was very restrained and restrained the excitement in their hearts. There were also people from other worlds who came to visit. They were curious about the situation of the middle peak after it became a barren land, so they came to visit. However, to be able to see Lord Xiao, whose name shook the world, made them feel that this trip was worth it. Xiao Yang didn't put on any airs. Anyone who greeted him, regardless of their status or cultivation, would nod and smile. This made Lord Zhao's image in everyone's hearts become even more majestic. Occasionally, Xiaoyang would ask about the situation here. Most of the time, it was just a casual question to know the recent situation of this land. When the disciples heard this, they were all very excited. They felt like they had received great care and were very happy. As for some people's cultivation, Xiaoyang didn't say a word about it even if he saw the problem. They all had their own sects, and only their masters could give them pointers. Once Xiaoyang had a good understanding of the Middle Peak, he headed west. Because Caesar Grotto Heaven was used by Xiaoyang to connect the Flowing Cloud Realm and the Mountain River map, it couldn't fall into the Flowing Cloud Realm. Therefore, he placed the Furious River there and used it as the most stable line of defense. This was the safest way. Chapter 2903. Along the way to the west, Xiaoyang deliberately slowed down to observe the situation and the flow of spirit qi along the way. Along the way, he saw many Qingwu, which made Xiaoyang feel very gratified. At the same time, he also found a few good seedlings, but he only paid a little attention to them and did not take them in. After all, they would have their own opportunities if they were able to join a sect in the future. The current Xiaoyang could be said to be the top existence in the Flowing Cloud world. Sometimes a sentence from him was enough to affect a person's life. Therefore, other than major accidents, he needed to maintain a state of watching more and speaking less in front of many things. He could not change a person just because of a casual sentence. Moreover, the fate of this world would mostly change because of Xiaoyang. After the last calamity, the Flowing Cloud world had recovered a lot in a short period of time. This made Xiaoyang feel very gratified. In less than 100 years, the Flowing Cloud world would completely rise. However, during this 100 years, Xiaoyang still had to protect this place like a guardian and not let it be affected again. However, it was impossible for Xiaoyang to guard this place all the time. After all, he still had his own thoughts. Fortunately, with the convenience of Caesar Grotto Heaven and the Mountain River map, even if something happened to the Flowing Cloud world, he could rush back immediately. After a while, Xiaoyang stopped. He heard the call of the world spirit. A white light flashed in the sky, and Xiaoyang directly entered. Arriving at this mysterious space that was filled with white light, Xiaoyang's lips curled into a smile. They had always been telepathic, but if there was nothing important, they would not contact each other like this or discuss things. "You've changed a lot after this trip," Lu Yun said with a smile. In the past, the world spirit rarely paid attention to Xiaoyang, but ever since he calmed the chaos in the demon world, it had paid some attention. This person was very strange. No one could guess what he was thinking about. It was also because his actions were unpredictable that the world spirit was on guard against him. Even when he helped him break through to the martial emperor realm, he still had a trick up his sleeve. Xiaoyang smiled and nodded. "It's changing all the time." Lu Yun smiled. This fellow seemed to have always been like this. As long as it wasn't something urgent, he could laugh it off. "I've heard of most of what you did in the Yin Flame world. Why did you specially go to the Middle Peak this time? What are your plans?" Lu Yun asked solemnly. This was also something she was more concerned about. Xiaoyang wouldn't do something without a reason. Of course, she had heard some inside information from Sun Dishing, but she wasn't very clear about it. Xiaoyang nodded and said, "I do have some ideas. I want to turn the Middle Peak into the real Middle Peak, and then add another line of defense to the west to fill the gap of Caesar Grotto Heaven." Hearing this, the world spirit's heart couldn't help but tremble. She also knew very well that although there was a line of defense in the west, it was still like an isolated city. It could only divert the enemy. Even though Pine Victory Mountain had indeed played an extraordinary role in the previous battle. However, that place was still suitable to be an important town at the rear and not the front line. Then, Xiaoyang took out the Mountain River map and opened it. Lu Yun leaned over and looked at the rivers and mountains. She was immediately shocked. "This is a mountain with 9 peaks. I snatched it from the Fire-Gathering Alliance. This mountain with 9 peaks is connected by chi and branches. It's a natural formation. It's incomparably profound, Xiaoyang introduced. Lu Yun nodded. She could naturally see it and felt it. At the same time, she also found some flaws. She asked, "Why are 2 of the peaks broken?" Xiaoyang shrugged helplessly and said, "Back then, I had to do this to break the formation." Hearing this, Lu Yun didn't ask anymore. It must have been extremely dangerous back then. That was why Xiaoyang came up with such a plan. The formation could be broken by destroying the peaks. This would probably be the formation's biggest flaw. This river is the Raging River. It even gave birth to intelligence. The Raging River's water isn't water. It's Yin flame. If it's used well, it can become a decent formation with great power, Xiaoyang said with a smile. The world spirit nodded. Her gaze towards Xiaoyang changed again. These were all powerful places that Xiaoyang had experienced along the way. He must have felt a lot of things, which was why he brought them back. Very good. You're very considerate, Lu Yun said. At the same time, Lu Yun felt a little sad. This man had racked his brains for the flowing cloud world. It seemed that he didn't have many desires, or perhaps he never had. When he broke through to the martial emperor realm, he was so anxious because he wanted to reach an agreement. He hoped that he could advance to the middle world together with the god realm. With Xiaoyang's talent, he would most likely be able to ascend after the god emperor and the others had successfully ascended. However, he didn't do that. Instead, he put in a lot of effort. Reality had also proven that his actions were correct. With an ally like the divine realm, they were able to continue surviving in this cruel middle world. Otherwise, Xiaoyang would have left because he couldn't do it alone, or even die. But I have another concern. I don't know if these blessed lands can take root in the flowing cloud world, Xiaoyang said with a frown. This was the most important point. Although Xiaoyang felt that it could, he wasn't as familiar with it as the world spirit. If she made the decision, it would be much safer. Of course, if it didn't work, there was nothing he could do. At that time, he could only think of a way to refine 1 mountain and 9 peaks into his weapon. As for the Raging River, he could only put it back to the Yin Flame world. This was an attempt. It was hard to predict whether it would succeed or not. Lu Yun's gaze turned gloomy. Then he said, "I'll go in and take a look." Xiaoyang nodded. Then he opened the mountain river map and let the world spirit in. The Raging River and 1 mountain and 9 peaks were attacked by the Yin Flame all year round. They even had such attributes. Hence, they were very unique. However, with such unique attributes in the flowing cloud world, it was inevitable that they would be incompatible. Hence, how to manage them naturally became a problem. Of course, these were all in the future. It was hard to say if these 2 blessed lands could take root in the flowing cloud world. Actually, Xiaoyang was also worried about this. He also had some thoughts. It wouldn't be too late to discuss the details after the world spirit came out. Chapter 2904. Now, Xiaoyang was also very nervous because he didn't know how many benefits his actions could bring. Of course, the feasibility of this plan was still questionable, and no one could say for sure. There were too many uncertain factors. No matter how thorough Xiaoyang's plan was, it was inevitable that he would be negligent. After all, he wasn't a god. It was impossible for him to really take care of everything. Fortunately, the world spirit was now on the same side as him, so he could have less worries and not be as helpless as before. Time waited for no man. No one could say what kind of variables would appear next. Looking at the stately painting, the corner of Xiaoyang's mouth curled into a helpless smile. If he wanted to continue improving the grade of this item, he would probably need to invest more resources. After a while, Lu Yun walked out of the mountain river map. "How is it?" Xiaoyang took a deep breath and asked excitedly. The placement of this mountain and river was a major matter in the flowing cloud world. It couldn't be sloppy at all. Moreover, it was already doubtful whether it could be confirmed. If the world spirit nodded, then this matter would naturally become much simpler. Lu Yun nodded with a smile and said, "Good mountain and water." These words made Xiao Yang's heart sink. This was indeed a good mountain and water, but she didn't say that it was suitable. No matter how good the mountain and water were, if it was not suitable for this world, forcefully placing it there would only add to his troubles. Thinking of this, Xiao Yang felt very helpless. Since he had already come to this step, what could he do? "You don't have to worry. Although we're somewhat repulsive, I and the world, and they're just mountains and water. As long as I change my fate slightly, I can accommodate them. At that time, it will be a long-term integration," Lu Yun said with a smile. Seeing Xiao Yang so nervous, Lu Yun also smiled. This young man was indeed not bad. No matter when, he would prioritize the flowing cloud world. It was indeed the flowing cloud world's fortune to have such a person as a co-owner. As for the symbiotic contract, the world spirit would not create it again. Because of what the previous person had done, her heart had been completely broken. She would not easily trust anyone again. When Xiao Yang heard this, he heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that his plan was worth it. Once it was implemented, the benefits he could obtain in the future would be even greater. On the surface, the defenses of the flowing cloud world would become as stable as Mount Tai, and it would no longer be as defenseless as before, leading to it being swept by the enemy. However, we can't be too anxious about this matter. We have to take it slow. In particular, the spirit of the raging river is too stubborn. Although it's submitted to you, it's mostly fake. You have to be more vigilant, said Lu Yun in a deep voice. Xiao Yang nodded. Previously, when he subdued the spirit of the raging river, he had seen the other party's true colors. Even after being burned to such an extent by Little Flame, he still refused to submit. He was indeed very stubborn. However, although such a fae was stubborn, if it changed its mind, it might be dead set on following him in the future. However, this was a very vast project. It was not easy to accomplish. Then it's decided, Xiao Yang asked. Lu Yun nodded and said, I've chosen a place where the raging river will land. Take a look. Then Xiao Yang closed his eyes. With a thought, he sensed the mountains and rivers in the west. Even the grass and trees were very clear. This direction is not bad, Xiao Yang said with a smile. After talking for a while, the matter was completely settled. Xiao Yang headed west alone. Although he had already sensed a general idea, it was still hard to say. He needed to think at length. Xiao Yang paced back and forth in the west, where the raging river landed. At the same time, he asked about the local customs. As the master of the world, his every move was watched. At the same time, because of his actions, many people felt that something big was about to happen. However, they could not say why, and it was not good to ask directly. Xiao Gongzhu's actions would definitely benefit the flowing cloud realm. This made many local cultivators very excited. Perhaps there would be a big opportunity that would fall on their heads. With an opportunity, it would not be a problem for them to soar into the sky. After 2 days of investigation, Xiao Yang had a clear understanding of many things. Of course, there was another important reason why Xiao Yang came to personally inspect, and that was to hide it. Now that the world spirit had begun to change the fate of these places, if it was discovered by someone, there would be some clues left behind. However, since Xiao Yang appeared here, no matter what happened, they would only feel that it was natural. There was nothing strange about it. After calculating these things, Xiao Yang turned around and returned to Northern Light City. Although there were many things that he did not need to worry about, and most of the time he only needed to nod and give instructions. However, wherever he was, he could affect the development of a world. Being in a high position or being powerful, most of the time, every move would affect the occurrence and change of many things. Although the current flowing cloud world was under great governance, there was still a sense of sadness. The impact of the war last time was great, and many innocent people had lost their lives in the flames of war. Moreover, the current strength of the Four Realms Alliance was only the strength of the top forces. Compared to any medium world, the Four Realms Alliance could not be compared to them. However, the improvement of the entire world's strength could not be rushed. It could only be done step by step. The consequences of pulling up seedlings to help them grow were unthinkable. As such, even if Xiaoyang had some methods, he did not dare to use them. Thinking of this, Xiaoyang returned to his own house and lay down on the rattan chair. He rocked back and forth comfortably, feeling very relaxed. However, there were many things on his mind. This time, without a doubt, he wanted to turn the flowing cloud world into a strong fortress so that no enemies could invade. However, such a vast project was not so easy to complete. As such, he still needed to put in a lot of time and effort. Plus, this was a big event in the flowing cloud world. There were many minor details that needed to be taken care of. Xiaoyang could not do all of this by himself. Luckily, he had many helpers. However, it was still a huge amount of work to be done in detail. Thinking about his position as the leader, Xiaoyang bitterly smiled. There was no way for him to shirk his responsibilities. Just then, Xiaoman walked out and said, "Young master, yesterday the God's Realm and the Sword Heart world sent people to deliver some things." Hearing this, Xiaoyang was stunned for a moment. Why would he give him something for no reason? Chapter 2905. This matter made Xiaoyang's heart pound. Could it be that something had happened again? What did the person who sent the gifts want him to do? Besides, he was more familiar with the God Realm and the Sword Heart Realm. Even if he had something to ask, he wouldn't be so polite. As a result, Xiaoyang was also a little confused. The other party's actions really made him unable to understand what was going on. At least, from the looks of it, it probably wasn't that simple. Xiaoman saw that her young master's expression wasn't good and immediately felt a little uneasy. Could it be that her following gifts were hot potatoes? Thinking like this, Xiaoman felt that she had made a mistake and felt even more depressed. How could he be so blind that he had to cause such a ruckus? At this moment, Xiaoman's heart could be said to be filled with guilt. If she had known earlier, she would have asked clearly first. Now, she wouldn't have made it so difficult for her young master. "Young master, why don't Xiaoman return these gifts one by one?" Xiaoman said somewhat timidly. She didn't know what the situation was now, so she could only ask tentatively, "How can I return the gifts that I've already accepted? Wouldn't that be slapping their faces?" Xiaoyang laughed bitterly and said. These words made Xiaoman feel even more uneasy. It seemed that this hot potato had fallen into her hands, and it was the kind that couldn't be thrown away. Thinking of this, Xiaoman felt even more depressed. She lowered her head, looking very much like a child who had done something wrong. Seeing this, Xiaoyang smiled. This silly girl just liked to think about things in a serious way. "Bring the things over first." "Let me take a look," Xiaoyang said in a deep voice. The other party left after sending the things over and didn't leave any words. It couldn't be said that it was a gift to familiarize themselves with each other. No matter what, it would be clear what kind of medicine was in the gourd after opening it and taking a look. Xiaoman handed the 2 storage rings that were like hot potatoes to Xiaoyang. She was extremely nervous in her heart. Xiaoyang took the rings and said with a smile, "Even if there's something, I can handle it. It's not your fault. Don't think too much." Xiaoman only felt that these were just words to comfort her. She just nodded and agreed, but she still felt wronged. This state made Xiaoyang somewhat helpless. Sometimes, when this girl blamed herself, even 10 oxen couldn't pull her back. Xiaoyang didn't care about her. He wanted to see what was inside first. When he saw the things inside the storage ring, he couldn't help but be speechless. The first thing he saw was a row of flying ships. It was a spectacular sight. "Don't tell me there are really 100 of them." Xiaoyang's mouth twitched as he muttered. Taking a closer look, there were exactly 100 airships, no more and no less. Xiaoyang couldn't help being dumbfounded. He hadn't expected that a joke he had made in the Inflame world would be taken seriously by these two. However, it must be known that every single one of these flying ships was a saint-level magic tool. Furthermore, it was extremely difficult to refine them. Even now, there was no one in the flowing cloud realm who could refine a flying ship that was comparable to a saint-level magic artifact. It had to be said that Princess Mingju's unique talent was not for show. To be able to mobilize 100 flying ships in such a short time, he was also somewhat impressed. This kind of talent was really enviable. As for the things inside the other ring, he didn't need to look to know that there were probably 100 flying swords inside. After investigating, Xiao Yang's expression eased up a lot. The grades of these 100 flying swords were also uneven. Among the saint-grade swords, there were only a handful of them. However, each flying sword looked rather unique. After all, how could a flying sword produced in the sword heart realm be simple? Perhaps many of these flying swords were the painstaking work of countless ancestors and were very suitable for sword cultivators. However, Xiao Yang was not a sword cultivator, so he couldn't see the true meaning of it. Immediately, he handed the 2 rings to Xiao Man and said, "Pick some magic tools that are convenient for you first." Xiao Man was stunned for a moment, then took it. After seeing the row of flying ships inside, she was even more shocked. The God Realm was indeed the God Realm. Their reputation of being rich and overbearing was well deserved. The moment they took action, they were simply rich enough to rival a country. No matter where these 100 flying ships were placed, it would probably cause a commotion. Although the flying ships were all saint-level magic tools, they were expensive. With so many of them, it was enough to shock people. Xiao Man also knew her young master's temperament, so she didn't stand on ceremony. However, she only picked 1 flying ship. As for those flying swords, they were also useless to her. Why did they send such strange things? Xiao Man asked with some confusion. Xiao Yang only smiled and said that he didn't know. He didn't want to say it out loud, as it was quite awkward to say it. At the same time, Xiao Yang also thought of another possibility. That was, the flowing cloud realm would not take a single cent of the compensation this time, so these things could be considered as compensation. In addition, the flowing cloud realm didn't have many flying ships to begin with. The 100 flying ships sent by the God Realm were like charcoal in snowy weather. This was a genuine relationship. As for how to repay it in the future, it was also thought-provoking. At least with Xiao Yang's current state and the flowing cloud realm's current wealth, they really couldn't afford it. But then again, the alliance between them wasn't a temporary idea. Who knows, they might work closely together for tens of thousands of years in the future. Therefore, there was no need to rush. Only through the exchange of favors could their relationship be refined. A day's time passed. When it was time for the meeting, Xiao Yang immediately went to the main hall of the city, Lord's Mansion. Who knew how many major matters of the flowing cloud realm would be discussed here? Because they came early, there weren't many people. The 2 heroes of the Sun family were the first to arrive. The Xiao family's old ancestor, Xiao Chongxing, and old master Xiao had also arrived. When they saw Xiao Yang, their eyes were filled with excitement and satisfaction. For the Xiao family to have such a descendant, how could they not be proud? After some small talk, Xiao Yang handed over the things that Princess Mingzhu and Bai Jian sent over to Sun Yukai. It was very safe for them to deal with and distribute these things. Of course, Xiao Yang also left a few flying ships for himself. In the future, when he went out to train, he couldn't do without them. When Sun Yukai, this miser, saw so many flying ships, he was so excited that he couldn't speak. The flowing cloud realm lacked many things, and flying ships were one of them. Ever since the matter of the Yin Flame realm ended, the descendants of the other realms started to go out to train. However, because the flowing cloud realm lacked flying ships, they didn't make any moves. Firstly, they didn't have a suitable expert to lead them. Secondly, they lacked tools. Chapter 2906. After a while, Arctic Greyfeather, Muyang, Chu Taiyin, and the others all arrived. Though most of them were familiar faces, there were also some new faces. Those who didn't come couldn't come anymore. The old leader of the Dark Knight, Holy Land, died in battle. The current leader was Yi 19. The leaders of the Taiyin and Taiyang sects also died in battle and changed. Baldi sat on the side alone and seemed a bit lonely. Though he had Chen Mingho by his side, his relationship with Chen Mingho was different. Baldi and Ji Fei have been in the flowing cloud boundary for so many years, and the hard work they've put in is obvious. Therefore, no one saw them as outsiders. But some things can't be covered up with passion. Reality was as such. No matter how much glory and respect one feels, it's hard to change one's heart. Seeing that everyone had arrived, Xiaoyang also began to give his opening speech. It was nothing more than talking about everyone's hard work. Everyone also quieted down and stopped discussing. They knew that if leader Xiao didn't have something important to discuss, he wouldn't easily gather all the important people for a discussion. All of them had a serious expression. They knew that what they were discussing today would affect the development of the flowing cloud boundary. Because of the disaster, everyone wanted to make this world rich and strong. Only then would they not be bullied by others. Because of all these, everyone knew that every step they took had great meaning and couldn't be decided easily. After he finished his opening speech, Xiaoyang's expression turned serious as he said, "I'm sure everyone has already heard the reason why I've invited everyone here today." When Sun Dishing returned, he should have told everyone about this so they could be mentally prepared. Everyone nodded one after another, but they only had a rough idea in their hearts. A few days ago, I investigated the Middle Mountain and the West Line. Therefore, I decided to settle the One Mountain Nine Peaks and the Furious River separately, Xiaoyang said in a low voice. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone's faces lit up with joy. Settling the blessed lands stolen from other worlds in one's own home. How happy was that? Moreover, their flowing cloud world was barren to begin with, so the more blessed lands there were, the better. Master Xiao has the final say in this matter, Mu Yang said with a smile. With Mu Yang, the second in command, speaking up, the rest of the crowd began to chime in. They didn't know what was at stake in this matter, but they were clear that once Xiaoyang saw something, there would naturally be no mistakes. This bit of information was enough to explain a lot of problems, so there was no need for them to worry. If there were any risks, Xiao Gongzhu would have dealt with it long ago. Why would they need to worry? Today he had only come to understand the general situation and find out what he needed to do. This wasn't because Xiaoyang was the one who had the final say, but because he had thought things through very carefully. Every step he took was admirable. Therefore, what else did they have to worry about? Xiaoyang was both happy and worried when he saw that everyone agreed with him. If everyone was able to work under a unified command, they would naturally be able to achieve twice the result with half the effort. It would be much simpler, but at the same time, there would be other hidden dangers. For example, if there were problems, they wouldn't have to worry about it. Since no one has any objections, then let's talk about the details, Xiaoyang said. After speaking, Xiaoyang took out a map of the flowing cloud world and pointed at a red line that he had drawn not long ago. I plan to place the Furious River here. That's good. If we can turn the raging river into a line of defense, we'll be able to resist the invasions of other worlds for a while longer. It'll be a lot safer. Mu Yang stroked his slightly white beard and smiled. Everyone nodded. They knew the geography of the flowing cloud world like the back of their hands, so they knew Xiaoyang's intentions. As for West Wind City and Spring Sun City, although they were each other's horns, they weren't reliable enough. The raging river was outside of these two cities, so it wouldn't be bad to use these two cities as a source of supplies. Xiaoyang nodded. The south has the distant South Grotto Heaven, and the north has the North Peak Grotto Heaven. These two grotto heavens can be used as a line of defense. As for the east, it's connected to the God Realm, so there's no need to set up any defenses. Only the west doesn't have a grotto heaven, so we can only use the Furious River to fill this gap. Everyone nodded. This was indeed the case. I'm afraid that some people and cultivators will be evacuated from this line. When the time comes, compensate them however you want. As long as it's not too much, everything can be discussed. Sun Yukai will take care of this, Xiaoyang said. No problem, Sun Yukai said. This red line didn't look very long on the map, but in reality it was an existence that stretched for tens of thousands of miles. Every household had to be taken care of. This was a huge workload. However, Sun Yukai wasn't worried. He had a few good seedlings under him, and he could use this to train their abilities. This furious river is only subservient to me, so it's not very reliable. As such, it's important to find someone to guard it, Xiaoyang said as his brows furrowed. From the beginning, Xiaoyang already had a candidate in mind, and that was Muyang, who had the vermilion token. Moreover, in the flowing cloud world, apart from Xiaoyang, he was the strongest. Naturally, there was no argument for him to guard it. The fortuitous encounters in the raging river were not small. If he could become one with the raging river, the benefits he would receive would not be small. However, there was a problem, and that was that Muyang was a fire of extreme yang. Compared to the characteristics of the furious river, there was a slight conflict. It could be said that this was what made people feel uneasy. It wasn't very suitable. Muyang frowned slightly. At this moment, he didn't know if he should speak. I've heard from King Zhao that there's a powerful formation on the furious river. It even has intelligence, and I'm afraid it won't be that easy to subdue. Xiao Changxing shook his head helplessly and said. Xiaoyang nodded. Even if it was him, Xiao wouldn't be able to subdue it. If it weren't for the Yin Flame spirit, the furious river spirit would only end up as Xiao was nourishment. Thinking of this, Xiaoyang was a little worried. Arctic Gray Feather and Qian Guangqi didn't say much, but they were also thinking about the matter. Yi-19 lowered his head. Although he had reached the martial dominator realm, his strength was still a far cry from these people. Thus, he didn't have the right to speak. Even though it was clear, Xiaoyang wouldn't care about it. As long as you have a way, you can say it regardless of your identity. The two heroes of the Sun clan were examples. Chapter 2907. For a moment, everyone looked at each other in dismay, unable to make up their minds. After all, this was an important matter. How could they explain it clearly? Once he was in charge of the raging river, he would definitely be under a lot of pressure. At that time, the burden of defending the western side would fall on that person's shoulders. This was a very heavy burden. If he didn't have enough ability, he naturally wouldn't be able to carry it. It could be said that the Sword Heart world was in the north, and the God world was in the east. The two sides with the most pressure were naturally in the south and west. From the previous battle situation, the enemy would attack from the west. As such, all the pressure would naturally fall on the west. I have stayed in the Yin Flame world before, so I understand the situation there. Therefore, I think that Senior Chu Tain is the best person to guard the raging river. Sun Dishing said. Hearing this, Chu Tain, who was recommended, frowned. Why did such a heavy burden fall on his head? Everyone looked over. Chu Tain was the third most powerful person in the flowing cloud world. Since Xiaoyang couldn't do it, and Muyang didn't express his opinion, Chu Tain seemed to be the most suitable. Senior Muyang is much stronger than me. The raging river is wild and untamed. I may not be able to subdue it. Chu Tain laughed awkwardly. It wasn't that Chu Tain didn't want to take on such a huge responsibility. Instead, he knew the importance of this matter. If there was even the slightest mistake, the consequences would be unimaginable. Therefore, how could he not be careful? Senior Chu Tain, you don't have to be humble. The responsibility of guarding the raging river is yours. Although the risk is great, it's also a lucrative job. Who knows, your great Tao opportunity might be in the raging river. Xiaoyang smiled. Speaking of which, the aura of Chu Tain and the raging river were somewhat similar. Different routes lead to the same destination. Sometimes, just a little similarity could lead to extraordinary changes. Hearing about the great Tao opportunity, Chu Tain's eyes couldn't help but light up. So many cultivators worked hard to cultivate. What was it for? Wasn't it to prove their great Tao? Okay, Chu Taiying frowned and nodded. Since there was such an opportunity, there was no harm in giving it a try. Moreover, the current flowing cloud world was lacking in manpower, so who would guard it was a problem. Xiaoyang smiled and nodded. Since Chu Taiying had agreed, this matter would not be difficult. The front line of the Furious River is led by Senior Chu Taiying. If there is a battle, everyone can rush over to help. You can also familiarize yourself with them on a daily basis, so that you won't be clueless when the time comes, Xiaoyang said. Everyone responded one after another. This was naturally the case. The problem of the Furious River was temporarily resolved. As for whether Chu Taiying could be of the same mind as him, that would depend on his own ability. Since that's the case, let's change the arrangement of the other lines of defense. The North Peak Grotto Heaven that Senior Chu Taiying used to guard will be replaced by Arctic Gray Feather. The South Distant Grotto Heaven will be guarded by you, Patriarch, Xiaoyang said. Everyone agreed, but Arctic Gray Feather's expression was a little ugly. Even though he wasn't too bad compared to the younger generation, it wasn't easy for him to guard over a paradise. Arctic Gray Feather wanted to say something, but Qi and Guangqi pulled him back. Xiaoyang naturally had his own considerations for making such arrangements. Mu Yang, on the other hand, did not mind. He could guard it anywhere. So, all that's left is the arrangement of the One Mountain and Nine Peaks. The natural formation of the One Mountain and Nine Peaks. I'm sure everyone has heard of it, Xiaoyang said. Mu Yang nodded and said, I've heard the divine empress say that it is indeed blessed by the heavens. That place was not simple. If it was properly managed, it would be a natural barrier. In fact, its status would even surpass that of the Pin Sheng Mountain, which had repeatedly performed miraculous feats. I will place the One Mountain and Nine Peaks in the middle peak, so that the middle peak will become the true core of the flowing cloud world, Xiaoyang said solemnly. Everyone couldn't help but raise their eyebrows, and their expressions immediately changed. They had thought that the One Mountain and Nine Peaks would replace the distant southern grotto heaven as the sturdier southern line of defense, but they had never thought that it would be used to construct the middle peak. Although they had been working hard to manage the middle peak these past few years, it would be difficult for that place to recover its former vitality in a short time. Wasn't this a little too careless? It could be said that the current Northern Light City was the core of the flowing cloud world. Although the Northern Light City did not have any dangerous terrain to rely on, and could be said to have been completely built on ordinary land, its current status was already extraordinary. Xiao Chongxing was also stunned. He finally understood why Mu Yang had changed the location he was in charge of. Senior Mu Yang is guarding the middle peak. No matter which place he goes to reinforce, it will appear to be closer, Xiao Chongxing said. Xiaoyang nodded. He had such concerns as well. Senior Mu Yang will guard the main mountain, and the Nine Peaks will be guarded by Ji Fei, Baldi, Qian Guangqi, Lin Shiyun, Old Master Xiao, and Yi 19. When the time comes, you can go take a look and choose a suitable peak. As for the remaining 3 peaks, we'll see who's suitable to guard them in the future, Xiaoyang said in a deep voice. Hearing this, everyone nodded. On the other hand, Yi 19 looked at Xiaoyang meaningfully. He couldn't figure out what this move was either. It could be said that Yi 19 was the weakest apart from the 2 heroes of the Sun clan. In fact, Xiaoyang's concerns were very simple. If the situation turned bad and they encountered another disaster, then the One Mountain and Nine Peaks would be the last fortress. At that time, the Dark Knight's sacred land would be able to bring their disciples to seek refuge. That's good. These 3 positions can also encourage the other cultivators of the flowing cloud world to work hard. Sundishing smiled. It could be said that whoever could become the peak master would definitely be honored. If no one has any objections, then this matter is settled. Xiaoyang smiled and asked, From Xiaoyang's point of view, Mu Yang could guard the Northern Light City or the One Mountain and Nine Peaks. Mu Yang's attainments and formations weren't low, but unfortunately he couldn't take care of both, so he naturally had to choose. Yi 19 and Lin Shiyun also expressed their opinions. They felt that they were still lacking in strength and wouldn't be able to take on big responsibilities. Xiaoyang also had his own considerations, so he smiled and advised them. After all, they were all core members, and they were also people that Xiaoyang trusted. It wasn't that he was favoritism, but that the world seemed stable, but it wasn't. Xiaoyang was in such a hurry to make the arrangements, but he was also worried. There was still no news from the sect behind Mingjun, so he didn't know when they would come. How could he not be worried about these hidden dangers? Chapter 2908. After settling these matters, they talked about the general situation of the flowing cloud world and the general situation of the 1 Mountain 9 Peaks and the Furious River. Then, everyone began to disperse. There were many things waiting to be done in the flowing cloud world. Everyone here carried many burdens on their shoulders. Naturally, they couldn't relax at all. They were all doing their best to make this world stronger as soon as possible. Soon, only Xiaoyang and the 2 heroes of the Sun family were left. City Lord, are you in such a hurry to do these things because you are worried about the sect behind Mingjun? Sun Dishing frowned slightly. Although they didn't know, Sun Dishing had witnessed that battle and collected some information. Therefore, he naturally knew more about it. Now that he observed more, it wasn't strange for him to come to such a conclusion. Xiaoyang nodded with a bitter smile. He didn't know how strong the sect behind Mingjun was. However, Mingjun's protectors were all 7th-level martial emperors, which explained a lot of things. As a result, Xiaoyang naturally had to think more. At least he had to perfect the areas he could control in case of emergencies. Seeing this, Sun Dishing didn't say anything else. If that was the case, then this matter could only be done as soon as possible. When do we start? Sun Dishing asked. Xiaoyang shook his head. I'm not sure yet. The environment of the Inflame world is very different from our flowing cloud world. If we don't make enough preparations, it will be difficult to land. This matter naturally couldn't be done recklessly. If their luck clashed, the flowing cloud world would be the unlucky one. If they did something bad with good intentions, the result would be very bad. I thought the peace would last for a while. It seems like we are still in a storm, Sun Yukai mumbled helplessly. However, Sun Yukai didn't complain or feel that it was inappropriate. Only in a storm could those geniuses grow quickly. Heroes were born in troubled times. How did your cultivation fall behind again? The flowing cloud world's golden age hasn't arrived yet. Don't waste your lifespan to see it, Xiaoyang said in a deep voice. Sun Dishing and Sun Yukai looked at each other. They were indeed very good at governing the world. However, in terms of cultivation, it was the exact opposite. But they didn't feel sad. With a master like Xiaoyang who was wise and willing to delegate power, they felt very comfortable. If it wasn't for him, no matter how much talent he had, he would probably be buried in the ground without any chance to display it. Political and martial arts, no one in the flowing cloud realm can compare to the 2 of you. Xiaoyang sighed. It's nothing, the 2 heroes of the Sun family said humbly. The 2 of them were overjoyed. They were naturally very comfortable with such affirmation. When this matter is over, all of you will take turns in seclusion to break through. Don't delay any longer. Without all of you, I will have a hard time in the future. After Xiaoyang finished speaking, he left with his hands behind his back. Sun Dishing and Sun Yukai lowered their heads. It was several times more difficult for them to cultivate than for them to properly manage the affairs of the flowing cloud realm. This was truly a difficult situation for him. I do want to see the future of Golden Age. Unfortunately, my talent is limited. Sun Yukai said self-deprecatingly. Their foundation was like that. Even though they had eaten a lot of heaven and earth treasures in these years, some things that were destined were difficult to change. Their realm had indeed increased by 2 realms, but they were clear that it was paced and couldn't withstand a single blow. However, they didn't need to do anything. The main purpose of increasing their realm was to prolong their life. The length of a cultivator's life was linked to their realm. This was also the reason why many people wanted to prove the great Tao. It was rumored that once one cultivated to that realm, they could achieve immortality. However, there were so many cultivators in the 3,000 worlds who had reached the peak of cultivation. It was as if there was always someone better than them. Sun Dishing and Sun Yukai both knew that Xiao Gongzhu was like this. He was born in the lower realm and ascended all the way to the upper realm. No matter where he was the first person. However, compared to the wider world, it seemed to be a little lacking. Just listen to me. Why think too much? We can't lose too much of our thoughts because of cultivation. Sun Dishing suddenly smiled and said. Sun Yukai shrugged helplessly. He only felt that this was the truth. That was all. After arranging the distribution of the One Mountain Nine Peaks and the Furious River, Xiaoyang returned to his courtyard to cultivate. He had been stuck at the bottleneck of level 5 for a long time. However, until now there was no sign of a breakthrough. This made him very worried. Now that he had made the major arrangements, he could calm down for a while and make some attempts. However, after 3 days of seclusion, he failed again and failed to break through. Immediately, Xiaoyang didn't force it. He began to move between the middle mountain and the western front. The world spirit was changing the fate and characteristics of the land. However, this was a very long job. It needed to be done slowly and couldn't be rushed at all. Moreover, there was one more thing, which was to conceal the aura of the world spirit to prevent it from being discovered. Sun Yotsai's ability to do things was not bad. In addition, he had Xiaoyang's prestige, so it could be said that many people responded to his call. All the families and sects on the western front where the Furious River landed began to move away. They felt that this was a major matter for the flowing cloud boundary. So what if there was no compensation? Of course, they all knew that with this river, their safety would be greatly guaranteed in the future. Furthermore, there were compensations, and some even received more or less support. Everyone left happily. Of course, there were some short-sighted people who felt that they could use this to blackmail others and start to ask for sky-high prices. They couldn't wait to take all the benefits into their own pockets. The result of their actions could only be the betrayal of the people. The gains did not make up for the losses. There was a sect leader of a small sect who wanted a yard after being given an inch. In one night, almost all the disciples left. The sect leader could only glare at them and couldn't do anything. He even had to endure the criticism of others. People always had to pay the price for what they did. It was hard to be an exception. Although there were some disturbances in the relocation, fortunately, it was handled properly and there was no trouble. In the end, the timing was good. Everyone in the flowing cloud boundary was united. Because of the chaos of war and the many things they had experienced, they admired their leader even more and had no doubts. In less than half a month, everyone on the Western Front had moved away. This kind of efficiency made Xiaoyang feel a little dumbfounded. As expected of Sun Yukai, his way of doing things was just right. Chapter 2909. As time went by, the Central Mountain and the Western Front were both changing. The Northern Light City even sent out many elites to guard the various places to prevent accidents from happening. Although Xiaoyang could observe every part of the flowing cloud world and ensure that nothing would happen, he did not dare to be careless. After all, sometimes putting on an act could prevent many accidents from happening, so this was feasible. Sometimes the amount of people invested could let others know how much importance they placed on this matter. This way, they could avoid many unnecessary troubles. As these things were going on in full swing, the news naturally began to spread. Many people sang Xiaoyang's praises. If it wasn't for sect leader Xiao, how could there be the flowing cloud world today? This was enough to make them admire him. There were many things in the world. At the same time, they rejoiced that there was someone like Xiao Gongzhu. Otherwise, the drifting cloud world would still be entangled with the devil world. How could there be such a grand occasion today? Even though the flowing cloud realm had lost a lot of cultivators after the disaster, those who managed to survive all received pretty good treatment. Cultivation had always been like this. Risks and opportunities coexisted. The great Tao was even more ruthless. You would never know that such a situation would occur, and you might even lose your life. The changes in the middle peak were even more rapid. Some of the smaller peaks were directly flattened by Xiaoyang, and he even set up a formation to ensure that the 9 peaks of the middle peak would be able to land safely. The raging river was too long and involved too many places and matters, so it was left for last. Moreover, with a unique existence like the raging river spirit, he could not be careless. During this time, the world spirit would try to communicate with it through the mountain and river map. However, the raging river spirit was like a stone in a latrine. It was smelly and hard, and it almost did not let go. However, there was no rush. No matter what, he had to do it step by step. After about half a month, the central mountain was completely developed and stabilized with the support of the world spirit. She even set back the mountain peaks that Bai Jian and Princess Mingzhu had cut off, restoring them to their original state. However, there were still some cracks and it wasn't firm enough. This was not a problem. As long as the 9 peaks of the mountain landed, the world spirit could continue to nourish it with its own power. On this day, Xiaoyang also went straight to the middle peak. At the same time, the 2 prodigies of the Sun family, Muyang, Chu Taiyin, and other important figures had also arrived. They also wanted to witness the grand occasion of adding bricks and tiles to their own world with their own eyes. Of course, adding bricks and tiles was an understatement. Xiaoyang's move was no less than adding a side courtyard. Muyang had one hand behind his back as he looked at Xiaoyang, who was floating in the air with a smile on his face. This young man was now in high spirits. What he was doing was what he wanted to do when he was young. There was a difference between them. Muyang was already here, and that was just a thought. But Xiaoyang did it. This was the biggest difference. As such, even though Xiaoyang was not very experienced, he was now the leader of the entire flowing cloud world. How many people in the world could do what Xiaoyang did? Muyang shook his head. He felt that no one in the flowing cloud world could compare to him. Lord Xiao is truly an unprecedented figure. First Lunar also sighed from the bottom of her heart. Chu Taiyin admired Xiaoyang very much. He was powerful, but that was one thing. But in terms of using people, he was even more unique and did not doubt the people he used. Moreover, Xiaoyang did not take all of the benefits for himself, nor did he give them to his own faction, Northern Light City. During this period of time, Chu Taiyin had understood quite a bit and knew how important the 2 additional blessed lands were. The Furious River was controlled by Chu Taiyin and not the people of Northern Light City. The mountain lord of the 9 peaks was Muyang, and the people of Northern Light City were only there to support him. It was as if he only used people based on whether they were suitable or not, and not favoritism. Like this, it gave the other factions space to develop. One had to know that many worlds were dominated by one faction, and they took most of the resources, making it difficult for other sects and factions. Leader of the world is like this, Muyang said with a smile. Chu Taiyin nodded in affirmation. He did not have any objections to this. Actually, Xiaoyang is more like a person of the underworld. It's because our flowing cloud world has experienced too much that it has led to people's hearts. Otherwise, if Xiaoyang went to other places, he would suffer. Muyang suddenly changed the topic and bitterly smiled. Muyang had been to many worlds and had seen many things. The flowing cloud world is the flowing cloud world. Chu Taiyin smiled. Hearing this, Muyang also laughed. That was indeed the case. Every world was different and unique. If it was a different world, whether or not Xiaoyang would be willing to be the leader would be a problem. Thinking back to when Xiaoyang wanted the flowing cloud world to become a middle world, they were all of one mind. This was the source of their mutual success. If they were not of one mind, Xiaoyang would be disappointed. Well said. Muyang smiled. Seniors, you should prepare yourselves. I heard that the 9 peaks of the mountain are extremely large. I'm afraid that half of the middle mountains will be taken up. Sun Dishing said in a low voice. Mu Yang and Chu Taiyin glanced over and nodded their heads. Xiao Yang had made such a big fuss here because he wanted this matter to be settled safely. He had even set up a formation and asked everyone to come and help. He did not want anything to happen. Moreover, he needed the 9 peaks of the mountain to slowly fall, so that if something went wrong, the middle mountains would be destroyed. Naturally, one could imagine how terrifying the tremors caused by the fall of the huge mountain would be. In the next moment, everyone felt the sky darken. When they looked up, they saw a huge picture. It was the mountain river map. After it was opened, it covered the sky and covered the sun. What a great artifact! Chu Taiyin gasped. It was his first time seeing such a grand artifact. As such, he was also very shocked. After the mountain river map opened, it began to shine with rays of white light. It looked very mysterious. I'm afraid this is no longer a spiritual artifact, Muyang muttered to himself as he stared at the massive mountain river map. In the next moment, they saw a huge mountain slowly appear from the map. However, because the sky was dark, they could not see it clearly. Chapter 29:10. The 9 peaks of the mountain slowly descended. Everyone was even more dumbfounded as they watched, feeling incomparably shocked. The mountain was huge, and it was indeed similar to Xiaoyang's previous arrangement. It directly occupied half of the middle mountain. After seeing the mountain appear, everyone stopped talking and all of them straightened their faces. At the same time, they each carried out their duties and injected their power into the formation to begin to welcome the falling mountain. Xiaoyang stood at the highest point and controlled the mountain river map to slowly release the 9 peaks of the mountain. At the same time, he used his own power to support it so that it would not fall directly. If the 9 peaks of the mountain didn't land smoothly and instead fell directly, the entire Zhongyue would be shaken to pieces. As for the mountain, it would naturally be shattered. At that time, all the plans would be like using a bamboo basket to draw water. The kick at the end could be said to be the most important. It was also related to whether the previous efforts would be in vain. Thinking of this, Xiaoyang's heart became heavier and heavier. He also tried his best to control it. At the same time, his mind was scattered everywhere to ensure that no accidents would happen. When he saw that everyone was fully focused on driving the formation to welcome it, he was very gratified. Although the drifting cloud realm had declined, with so many people of the same path, why worry about not rising again? Soon, the 9 peaks of the mountain fell. The mountain river map seemed to have begun to shake a little and was pulled down a lot. Xiaoyang also deliberately lowered it a little so that everyone would not be unable to bear it with their strength. When 2/3 of the mountain's true appearance was revealed, the mountain river map could not hold it any longer. It was as if it could fall at any time. Immediately, Xiaoyang had to immediately add power, but it seemed to be a little difficult to hold it. From high to low, the weight increased exponentially. At this moment, everyone's faces became livid. Because the mountain was already pressing on the formation, they also felt it at the same time. The word heavy could no longer be used to describe it. They felt an incomparably powerful pressure, as if they could be crushed at any time. This feeling was very terrible, and it made them almost unable to breathe. Furthermore, they had the formation to share the burden of the impact. If that was the case, then Xiaoyang was standing alone at the foot of the mountain. How terrifying would the impact be? In fact, Xiaoyang was also fine. He used the power of the world to bear the burden, and it was not as terrifying as imagined. Due to the large number of people, Xiaoyang was the only one who could perform this miraculous technique. As for the world spirit, it stood in the distance and watched, letting Xiaoyang complete this task alone. By doing so, he could avoid any possible exposure. Secondly, the world spirit had some other ideas. Everyone, we have to grit our teeth and hold on. We can't let the chi of fortune that the middle mountain has been cultivating for so long be shattered by this mountain. Mu Yang's cultivation was slightly higher, so he immediately transmitted his voice to the others. Yi 19, Qian Guangqi and the others smiled bitterly. Their realms were lower, and they had almost reached their limits. However, they did not give up and continued to persevere. If they could completely endure this process, their cultivation would become extremely stable because of it. In fact, with Xiaoyang's strength alone and the help of the World Spirit, it was not difficult for him to make 1 mountain and 9 peaks descend. The reason why he did so was to help them stabilize their cultivation. Although most of them had experienced war and their cultivation was stable, it was still not enough. Furthermore, there were some differences between taking on the mountain and other things. 1 mountain and 9 peaks descended steadily from the mountain river map. Everyone endured the immense pressure and allowed it to land slowly. As the distance between the mountain and the ground decreased, the pressure they felt increased. Qian Guangqi, Lin Shiyin, and the others were even more tensed up and their bodies trembled. However, their minds were very firm. No matter how much pressure they endured, they gritted their teeth and persevered. Xiaoyang saw everything and felt very gratified. As long as they could make it through, their perseverance this time would definitely be rewarded. "Everyone, be careful, it's about to descend," Xiaoyang called out. Immediately, everyone became extremely alert. Now 1 mountain and 9 peaks were only 3 feet away from the ground. Seeing the foot of the mountain descend inch by inch, everyone's hearts began to pound. Now, the speed of descent was extremely slow, but the pressure they felt also increased, to the point that they almost suffocated. In fact, even Muyang and Chu Taiyin's foreheads were covered in cold sweat, which showed just how much pressure they were enduring. Of course, Xiaoyang had calculated that the formation would be tailored according to their cultivations, so the pressure they would have to endure would naturally be different. From their performance, it was enough to tell whether their cultivations were stable or not. Sun Dishing and Sun Yukai did not participate. Only the 2 of them were King Wu's cultivators. When they saw such a spectacular scene, the smiles on their faces became even wider. Although the mountain gave off a gloomy feeling, the spiritual qi that formed its own vein was extraordinary. Even laymen like them could see how extraordinary it was. What a big deal. In the past, it was only the demon realm that stole from our drifting cloud world. Now, we've brought back such a spiritual land from another world. How satisfying, Sun Dishing said proudly. Sun Yukai shook his head. He did not like chaotic times, and he did not want his world to start a war with other worlds. However, sometimes there was nothing he could do about it. He had no choice but to do this. Buzz! Even though 1 mountain and 9 peaks landed on the ground very steadily, there was still a muffled sound. Dust and dirt flew everywhere, and the ground of the middle peak trembled. Even with the protection of the formation and the world's energy, it was difficult to completely cancel out the tremors. Fortunately, everything was fine. Muyang, Chu Taiyin, and the others did not care about their image as they directly fell to the ground and panted. In order to make 1 mountain and 9 peaks land on the ground, it was even more tiring than fighting to the death. At this moment, Xiaoyang did not do anything. He looked at the sky as a smile appeared on his face. A light breeze blew by, making everyone feel cool. Standing on the main peak, he felt a sense of vastness. Suddenly, Muyang and the others all raised their heads. When they looked at the main peak, their faces were filled with joy. Countless amounts of spirit qi flowed towards the main peak and entered Xiaoyang's body. Xiaoyang had been stuck at the bottleneck of the 5th level for a long time. Who would have thought that an opportunity would appear today to help him break through? The matter of breaking through to the next realm could be said to be a mystery within a mystery, and it came in such a miraculous manner. Chapter 2911. The opportunity to break through was not easy to come by. How could Xiaoyang let it slip from his hands? After waiting for such a long time, he could not afford to make any mistakes. Xiaoyang sat down cross-legged and absorbed the spiritual energy around him like a whale, swallowing a whale. Suddenly, his entire body looked like a whirlpool. Countless amounts of spiritual energy poured into his body at an extremely fast speed. At the same time, the aura around him also changed. The world spirit seemed to have sensed it as well, and it continued to transfer its power to Xiaoyang to help him, ensuring that there would be no mistakes when he broke through the realm. Seeing such a phenomenon, everyone's expression couldn't help but change. Wasn't this too sudden? Lord Xiao is truly amazing. Breaking through to the next level was a piece of cake for him, Chu Taiyin said with a bitter smile. Thinking back to when they met in the demon realm, Xiaoyang was still one realm lower than him. But now he was so far ahead that people could only look up to him but not reach him. The gap was so big. Sometimes it seemed like he was only one step behind, but in reality, after that one step, every step was slower. Mu Yang stroked his beard with satisfaction. He felt that the stronger Xiaoyang was, the more confidence they would have in the flowing cloud realm. Perhaps after this breakthrough, the surrounding realms would not dare to covet them anymore. Otherwise, when the time came, they would have to carefully consider whether the power of an entire world could stop one Xiaoyang. Sect leader Xiao has stepped into the 6th stage. That means he is on the same level as the God Emperor. Chu Taiyin continued, the smile on his face becoming wider. For a long time, the flowing cloud realm had been criticized because they did not have enough experts. Compared to the cultivators of other realms, they were more or less inferior. But after today, this feeling would most likely disappear without a trace. The current God Emperor, the strongest person in the 4-realm alliance, was also a 6th stage martial king. Mu Yang nodded. Then he spread out his divine sense. Now was Xiaoyang's most crucial moment, so he naturally could not be disturbed. Of course, the current flowing cloud world was heavily guarded, so it was naturally impossible for it to be invaded so easily. Moreover, how could an expert who could shake Xiaoyang silently enter the flowing cloud world? However, it was better to be safe than sorry. In this huge middle world, there might be some amazing characters. If he was not careful, he might really make a mistake and become an eternal regret. Xiaoyang was the drifting cloud world's only hope. If anything happened to him, the drifting cloud world would lose its right to speak. It could be said that Xiaoyang was holding up the sky by himself. The smile on Xiao Changxing's face became even wider because of this. How could he not be happy when he saw his own junior being so outstanding? It could be said that the Xiao family also gained a great reputation because of Xiaoyang. However, it was a pity that the Xiao family produced Xiaoyang. It was as if they had used up all their luck, and it was difficult for them to produce another genius who could match him. Even compared to the first-rate geniuses of the flowing cloud world, they were far inferior. This was also something that Xiao Changxing had always been worried about. He was also very clear that with Xiaoyang's vision, he could not always stay in the flowing cloud world. Even the entire middle world would no longer belong to him. He would definitely go to an even wider world. Thinking of this, Xiao Changxing's heart was somewhat sorrowful. The Xiao family did not have a successor, which was the biggest problem right now. However, this kind of thing could not be solved by worrying about it. He had personally guided a few juniors, but they were unable to comprehend it. This made Xiao Changxing, who was already somewhat disheartened, even more depressed. Countless amounts of spiritual energy continued to pour into Xiaoyang's body. It was as if the amount of spiritual energy he needed to break through this time was incomparably vast. It was as if the entire world's spiritual energy was not enough. Xiaoyang also knew that he had the world spirit to back him up, so he was able to absorb the spiritual energy in an unbridled manner. Very quickly, that layer of barrier collapsed under the force of a flood. The breakthrough was so fast. At the same time, Xiaoyang also began to stabilize his realm. Although every step he took was very solid, most of the time he was willing to repeatedly hammer it. If he wanted to reach the top, then every step he took naturally had to be incomparably solid. There could not be any mistakes. This was the principle of good preparation. When one's realm was high, problems that one did not care about when one's realm was low would be magnified infinitely. In the end, it would even affect the great Tao, as expected of the boss. The Baldy sighed. Time passed quickly. Unknowingly, the distance between them had widened. It was like the difference between heaven and earth. Thinking of this, the Baldy felt a little uncomfortable in his heart. Of course, he was also clear about what kind of person he was and what kind of person Xiaoyang was. The gap between them was already destined from birth. At the same time, the Baldy's heart was very carefree. Reality proved that he did not follow the wrong person. If he had not followed Xiaoyang, he was afraid that in the 3,000 small worlds, he would not have known when he would encounter an almighty and lose his life. But now he had come to the middle world. He had even achieved the martial emperor realm that he had never dared to think about before, although his realm was not enough in the middle world. But the belief in his heart had already been fulfilled. Lin Shiyun, Qian Guangqi, and the others also smiled. They did not feel indignant or jealous. They had all ascended from the middle realm. Xiaoyang had always been creating miracles. The speed of his breakthrough was very fast. It was obvious to all. These were all common occurrences. Yi 19 smiled bitterly and shook his head. When they were at the same starting line, it seemed like a long time had passed. Or it could be said that they were never at the same level. Now, in the Four Realm Alliance, there was a saying that Princess Mingzhu, Xiaoyang, and Bai Jian were all peerless talents. The three of them were unique existences. They were also known to have the chance to reach the level of the Emperor God, or even surpass it. As for the people on the Hidden Dragon Roll, they were nothing to them. Back then, Princess Mingzhu had never been on the Hidden Dragon Roll. Now, the Hidden Dragon Roll in the God Realm had changed because of the Four Realm Alliance. As long as the people of the Four Realms were under 1,000 years old, they could enter it. After Xiaoyang stabilized his realm, he slowly stood up and exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. He cupped his hands and said to everyone, "Thank you for protecting me." After breaking through, he felt refreshed. His perception had also become much clearer. Even the blurry perception of the flowing cloud realm had become much clearer. Chapter 29:12. Everyone was full of smiles as they congratulated Xiaoyang. His breakthrough this time had a different meaning to the entire flowing cloud world. It could be said that the higher Xiaoyang's realm was, the more confidence the flowing cloud world would have in the future. This was the meaning of it. If one wanted to be strong, then one naturally needed strength to support it. If one couldn't even achieve this, then one could only live under the nose of others in the end. The flowing cloud world was also a valiant place created through killing. How could it live under others for a long time? Master Zhao's current realm, is it comparable to the Emperor God? Chu Taiying asked with a smile. Immediately, everyone pricked up their ears and even held their breaths, waiting for the answer with full concentration. This was also what they were looking forward to. If Xiaoyang could win against the Emperor God, then what kind of situation would their flowing cloud world usher in? These were also known. Just thinking about it made people extremely excited. This question stunned Xiaoyang. Chu Taiying was indeed a wolf with wild ambitions. Xiaoyang didn't mind. Sometimes, when one suppressed it for too long, one's heart would be a little unhappy. It was normal for there to be some deviation because of this. However, at least if he suppressed it in his heart and didn't do anything wrong, then there was naturally no problem. Now, Xiaoyang could also be considered to be in the same realm as the Emperor God. He pondered in his heart for a while, then shook his head. Probably not as good as the Emperor God, Xiaoyang said. It wasn't that Xiaoyang was modest, but that the Emperor God was indeed tyrannical and his strength was unfathomable. Back when the Emperor God came to the Inflame world, he didn't see him use many big moves, but he had the 9 peak masters in his grasp. From this, it could be seen that his strength was as vast as the sea. Moreover, the Emperor God was also good at hiding his strength. Now, probably no one knew where the peak of this emperor god's strength was. If it was a spar, it was definitely impossible to win against such a person. If it was a life and death battle, then what the final outcome would be, that was hard to say. Xiaoyang was not an ordinary stage 6 powerhouse, and neither was the god emperor. Furthermore, it seemed that the god emperor had never fully revealed his strength. Who knew how terrifying the genius, who had once reigned supreme in the god realm, was now? It could be said that when the Four Realms Alliance gained a foothold in the Middle World, it seemed that Xiaoyang was the one who contributed and even turned the tide. However, without the presence of an emperor god, it was hard to say how the situation would turn out. When Chu Taiyin heard this, he smiled bitterly. Since that was the case, he naturally did not ask any more questions. Moreover, it was indeed difficult to determine who was better in these matters. They were just curious. After getting Xiaoyang's answer, there was no need for them to continue asking. Shortly after, Xiaoyang brought everyone back to Northern Light City. At the same time, he told them about some things to take note of in the One Mountain and 9 Peaks. After all, this was a blessed land that did not belong to the Flowing Cloud world, and there were some differences in attributes, so it would naturally take a long time to manage. After everything was explained, everyone dispersed and began to work on their own matters. Chu Taiyin brought Baldi, Qianguangqi, and the others to start setting up the Furious River. As for Muyang, he brought Arctic, Gray Feather, Shaochangsheng, and the others to the place where the middle peak was being nurtured. The setting up of these 2 places was of utmost importance, and there could not be any mistakes. If they succeeded, it would be an existence that would affect the world for 1,000 years. It was obvious how important it was. Moreover, there were no wars in the Flowing Cloud world, so these things would not be so boring. Not long after, the Sword Heart world and the God Realm, which were closest to the Flowing Cloud world, sent people to congratulate them. In fact, the Four Realms Alliance knew that Xiaoyang had reached the 6th level Martial King realm. This was different. Xiaoyang was the 4th person to reach the 6th level, and the other 3 were in the God realm. The Sword Heart world was the first to arrive, but it was not by Jian but Li Chuanyi. Back in the 10 Directions 8 Wasteland map, Xiaoyang and Li Chuanyi were old friends. In addition, Li Chuanyi was in charge of the Sword Heart world, so he could be considered the next Sword Master. There was a saying in the Sword Heart world that the position of Sword Master would be divided into 2 after Li Fengmu. Bai Jian would be the nominal Sword Master of the Heavenly Sword, and Li Chuanyi would be the Sword Master of the Sword Heart world. Although Li Fengmu had not retired, Princess Mingzhu Xiaoyang and Bai Jian's actions had already created a great momentum. The world would belong to the young people. Brother Xiao is really extraordinary. I didn't expect you to break through so quickly, Li Chuanyi said with a smile. Xiaoyang smiled and nodded, saying, Brother Li is not bad either. You are now a 3rd level Martial King, and in the Four Realms Alliance, you are a rare person. Moreover, you are in charge of many things, and it is not easy for you to cultivate to such a level. Li Chuanyi, on the other hand, smiled. He did not think that Xiaoyang was being sarcastic. After all, Xiaoyang was still willing to call him brotherly, which was enough to see that his mentality had not changed. Even if his strength was close to the Ascendant Realm, he was still the same Xiaoyang as before and had not changed. The 2 exchanged greetings for a while and talked about many things, but most of them were vague. They had completely let go of the so-called identity and just treated it as if it was the first time they met. At the same time, Xiaoyang also learned another thing, and that was Bai Jian's stubbornness. This time he should have been the one to congratulate, but he threatened that if he was not in the same realm as Xiaoyang, he would never meet him. He could not afford to lose face. Hearing such words, Xiaoyang could not help laughing. Sometimes this Bai Jian's competitive mentality was like that of a child's. He would block everything, and when he was stubborn, no one could persuade him. If it were anyone else who said such words, they would probably laugh it off, but Bai Jian was different. Now, Bai Jian could be said to be a popular figure and an existence that was highly respected. Back then, after he failed to break through during the battle in the West Plains, Most people sighed and lamented that the next generation of sword masters was gone just like that. However, they did not know that after a trip to the Sword Scar Abyss, his realm improved by leaps and bounds, and he went straight to the Ascendant Realm. As soon as Li Chuanyi left, the people from the Heavenly Realm arrived. The people from the Heavenly Realm were the king and unrivaled god. They were familiar with each other, so the Emperor God also felt that it was best for them to come and pay a visit personally. The king also knew his limits. This time he came to congratulate and get to know each other better, so it was just a formality. The gifts he sent were not bad, and there were a few spiritual weapons among them. As expected of the Heavenly Realm, it was fine if they did not make a move, but once they did, they were rich and imposing. Just like a local rich man, he could only take out things that one could not imagine. There was nothing he could not take out. Chapter 29:13. After the routine business, the king left with the excuse that he had a lot of work to do. This was not much of a reason. The God Realm and the Drifting Cloud Realm were quite similar. The Drifting Cloud Realm put the two heroes of the Sun family in important positions, while the king and the prime minister handled all matters in the God Realm. As for Lord Shao and the Emperor God, they were like hands-off managers. If it was nothing serious, they would definitely not show up. Of course, they knew that their own abilities were the most important thing. As long as they were strong enough, they could ensure the safety of their own worlds. Although the crisis in the Flame Realm and the 10,000 Beast Realm had been resolved, who knew if there were any hidden enemies? They had to be careful with every step they took. No matter what kind of crisis it was, as long as they were strong enough, they could turn it into safety. Moreover, after experiencing so many things, they had placed great importance on this point. Unrivaled God did not leave. As good friends, it was not a bad idea for them to talk together. Unrivaled God was not considered weak now. The Hidden Dragon leaderboard #1 from back then had shown his abilities. Now that he was a rank 3 martial emperor, he was still one of the best among the younger generation. He was only one step away from rank 4. However, compared to Xiaoyang and the others, he was still a little lacking. After all, the three of them were monsters. They could not be compared. Unrivaled God was now one of the 4 god generals, but his nature had not changed. He kept asking questions as soon as he arrived. Is there really nothing going on between you and Mingzhu? Unrivaled God asked with a gossipy and extremely curious expression. Xiaoyang put his hand to his forehead. This guy was now in a high position and could be considered an almighty. Why was he still so nonsensical? You guys conquered the 10,000 Beast Realm and the Flame Realm together. You guys went through thick and thin together. Is there really nothing going on? Unrivaled God continued asking. Xiaoyang felt rather helpless at this guy's questions. We were just working together to fight the enemy, Xiaoyang said with a wry smile. In the beginning, it was because of Unrivaled God's big mouth that he made enemies everywhere when he first entered the God Realm. I understand now. It must be that third wheel by Jian who got in the way. But then again, didn't he go back first? You guys came back from the Flame Realm. That's a long journey, and you have nothing to do. So, of course, Tisk, Unrivaled God said with a meaningful look. Xiaoyang was about to collapse. He knew that women loved to gossip, but this woman was even more terrifying when she gossiped. Moreover, he seemed to be able to say anything without any shame. Everything about Unrivaled God was great. He was loyal to his brothers, but he had no filter. He said whatever he wanted. If you want to know what happened, you can ask Princess Mingzhu. Xiaoyang sighed helplessly. If he continued to be entangled, who knew what kind of things would be said? Once it passed through this fellow's mouth, it would have a drastic change in flavor, and the more it spread, the more outrageous it would become. Therefore, keeping silent and ending the topic was the best choice. She's an old lady who can't get married. She hates these things the most. If I were to ask her about it, I'd be hunted down for hundreds of thousands of miles, Unrivaled God said, shaking his head. Xiaoyang felt rather helpless when he heard Unrivaled God's words. This guy's shamelessness could be said to have reached the extreme. What? Do you think I won't hunt you down for hundreds of thousands of miles? Xiao Yang's expression changed as he said in a low voice. As soon as he said that, Unrivaled God's expression changed as well. He looked at Xiao Yang and subconsciously took a few steps back. If this had been before, he would not have been afraid. They were about the same. However, the difference between them now was like heaven and earth. It was extraordinarily huge. "We're brothers," Unrivaled God said with a cheeky grin. However, seeing that Xiao Yang was unmoved and looked like he was about to attack in the next moment, Unrivaled God's heart began to pound like a drum. "You brat, are you trying to bully others?" "Ha! It seems that I, Unrivaled God, have failed to recognize you as my friend," Unrivaled God said with a pained expression. Xiao Yang felt even more helpless as he listened to Unrivaled God's quibbling. It seemed that it was useless to argue with him about this. In this aspect, Xiao Yang was really no match for him. "Are you guys really all right?" Unrivaled God asked doubtfully after asking for a long time, but still could not figure out what was going on. Xiao Yang nodded. He and Princess Mingzhu were friends and had gone through life and death together. However, they were just friends. Unrivaled God looked extremely disappointed as he slumped into the chair and sighed. "I thought of you as my brother. That's why I pushed that girl to you. I didn't expect you to not understand my sincerity." Xiao Yang could not help but laugh. "That girl Mingzhu doesn't understand either." "Oh, you guys." Unrivaled God beat his chest and stomped his feet as he spoke. Xiao Yang did not watch this fellow's performance. If he were to talk to him, Unrivaled God would probably continue talking endlessly as if he had found an opening. Then he would have a hard time. As expected, after a short while, Unrivaled God was on his own and could not continue speaking. After the two of them chatted for a while, Unrivaled God went to rest. Now that it was peaceful, Unrivaled God had some free time. Therefore, he was prepared to stay in the drifting cloud realm for a while. Furthermore, he still wanted to see the true appearance of the new 1 mountain and 9 peaks. After Unrivaled God left, Xiao Yang shook his head helplessly. "Young master, Princess Mingzhu is not bad," said Xiao Naughty, who was standing behind him. Xiao Yang, who had just stood up, slumped back down immediately. He looked at this girl in despair. Why did she have to rub it in? Xiao Naughty frowned slightly. She was also a little confused. Did she say something wrong? Princess Mingzhu and Princess Mingzhu are a match made in heaven. Don't be too picky. At that time, Master and Madam hoped that you would grow up well, have a child, and start a family, continued Xiao Naughty. Xiao Yang was about to lose all hope. If Princess Mingzhu heard what he said, who knew what kind of trouble it would cause? Xiao Yang walked out immediately. He was afraid that he would be depressed if he stayed in this place any longer. Xiao Naughty scratched her head. She could not tell what her young master was thinking. However, she did not think that she had said anything wrong. Why was her young master a little unhappy? Xiao Naughty could not figure it out, so she stopped thinking about it. Xiao Yang only felt much better after he walked out of Borealis City. "Brother Xiao, long time no see. I didn't expect the gap between us to be so big since we parted all those years ago." At this moment, a bright voice sounded. Xiao Yang looked up. It was Luo Rong from the Sun Snow Realm. Needless to say, Luo Rong was probably here to congratulate him on his breakthrough. Chapter 29:14. Xiao Yang's breakthrough was of great significance to the Four-Realm Alliance. His success meant that the alliance would become even more powerful as a result. Seeing Luo Rong, Xiao Yang just smiled and said some congratulatory words. After some small talk, he asked someone to arrange Luo Rong's accommodation. There were not many people from the drifting cloud world who came to congratulate him. Most of them were powerful figures from the most powerful sections. Moreover, they did not need to be so distant. Most of the people who came to congratulate him wanted to get acquainted with him and build a relationship. However, these people did not have the chance to see Xiaoyang. They were all stopped by Sun Dishing and the others. Xiao Gongzhu was very busy, and his time was very precious. How could he have the spare time to see some people with bad intentions? If they were really capable, they would be appreciated. As for whether they could become Xiaoyang's disciple, that was another matter. No one could say for sure. After Xiaoyang returned to his small house, he continued to lie on the rattan chair and rocked back and forth. At the same time, he was making some calculations in his mind. Now, there was only one big thing in the drifting cloud world. That was to wait for the furious river to be settled. After everything was arranged, Xiaoyang could go out and travel. It was just that it was still unknown which direction they would head in next. Moreover, there was no news from the Inflame world. What was the attitude of the sect behind Mingjun? These questions made him feel helpless. Now, it seemed that he was in a passive position. Therefore, when Xiaoyang went out to travel, his first choice was to go to the world where Mingjun's sect was. What kind of attitude that sect had was very important to Xiaoyang. If they wanted to start a war with the drifting cloud world for Mingjun, then they could only use the same method as before. In the end, the drifting cloud world was too weak and could not accept the war. Moreover, the flames of war could not spread to their land. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. Thinking about this, Xiaoyang's heart felt uncomfortable. There was still a long way to go. After that, Xiaoyang restrained his thoughts and started to observe the entire drift cloud world. Even if he didn't step out of his room, as long as he used his divine ability, he would be able to see everything clearly. Very soon, Xiaoyang discovered some differences. Although the spirit energy of the flowing cloud world was mainly directed towards the middle of the mountain to nurture the 9 peaks, it still felt different. This made people a little surprised. This kind of change came a little too quickly, and Xiaoyang felt a little unprepared. If this situation continued, then this place would undergo a great change. Very quickly, Xiaoyang discovered the root of the problem. That small spirit vein had grown a lot stronger at some point in time. This scene left Xiaoyang dumbfounded. Spirit veins were the foundation of a world. As long as the spirit vein was large enough, it would be able to provide more spirit energy. Back then, the realm of the gods was able to surpass everyone in the 3,000 small worlds because they had the advantage of spirit veins. Furthermore, they had 2 of them. Hence, there were as many 8th rank Kingwu there as there were hairs on a cow. After reaching the middle world, there were even more martial emperors there. Although the current strength of the realm of the gods was still not enough in the 3,000 small worlds, after 100 years, they would probably become an overlord because of this innate advantage. Spirit veins were extremely mysterious. It was not easy to nurture them. This was also something that could only be found by chance. If that world had such an item, then it was inevitable that it would rise. Back then, when the spirit vein was born in the drift cloud world, it was still very small. It was like a small stream, and its effect was also very small. At that time, Xiaoyang felt that it was only a hope. However, now that the spirit vein had grown strong and was as big as a river, he was very satisfied. Every time you break through, you will give us feedback. Hence, the spirit vein will also grow strong. The world spirit appeared at this moment and smiled. Seeing the spirit vein that had become stronger, Luyan's lips curled into a smile. It could be said that Xiaoyang had used his own strength to forcefully raise the drift cloud world to a height that it could not reach. Suddenly, Xiaoyang seemed to have thought of something. He frowned and said, "Previously I was stuck at the bottleneck of the 5th rank because of this?" Xiaoyang and the drift cloud world were closely related. They could even be said to be symbiotic. Previously, Xiaoyang was dragging the drift cloud world forward. However, at this step, the drift cloud world could no longer keep up. Hence, it would drag him down. Lu Yin only smiled and nodded in acknowledgement. Xiaoyang laughed heartily and did not take this to heart. This was just a confirmation in his heart. He wouldn't go over the line and insist on arguing about it. This way, many things could be explained. Why was he able to break through as soon as the 9 peaks landed? It was probably because the drift cloud world had grown stronger and was no longer dragging him down. If this continued, then the drift cloud world would become a huge burden to Xiaoyang. If he wanted to go to a higher realm, even if he had the opportunity, it would be difficult for him to advance due to the drift cloud world's weakness. These were all problems that he had to consider. However, from how Xiaoyang saw it, this matter was simple and easy to solve. As long as he used his own world to feed back and nurture the drift cloud world, when the quality of the world increased, he could naturally break through. However, if a person wanted to nurture a world, it was just a matter of talking, but actually doing it was not an easy task. Do you regret it? Lu Yin asked with a smile. Actually, the world spirit knew very well that Xiaoyang and it had helped each other. However, at the very beginning, it was only when it was time for him to break through. However, after coming to the middle world, it was Xiaoyang who was nurturing the drift cloud world. Before, as long as the drift cloud world could borrow some power, it could keep up. However, as Xiaoyang's cultivation level increased, and the flowing cloud realm's development was extremely slow, it was unable to keep up. The descent of the 9 peaks was like adding bricks and tiles to the drift cloud world's strength, which was why Xiaoyang had the opportunity to break through. Otherwise, if the stalemate continued, who knew how long it would take for Xiaoyang to break through? Thinking about this, Lu Yun felt helpless. Dragging Xiaoyang down like this wasn't something she wanted to do. However, in the current drift cloud world, other than Xiaoyang, she did not feel that anyone else could carry the flag. Chapter 29:15. Xiaoyang shook his head. He did not take Lu Yun's words to heart. Since he was able to become the 11th martial emperor in a small world, he naturally had the courage to accept the consequences. He was not going to abandon the people who had helped him just because he had become rich. Moreover, if the flowing cloud realm's quality could not be increased, even if Xiaoyang's cultivation was high enough, he would not be able to leave this place with a clear conscience. Thinking about this, Xiaoyang felt bitter. Even the changing seasons were like this. Soon after, Xiaoyang did not care about this anymore. Since he had chosen this path, he would walk it to the end. Even if he had to leave in the future, he would part on good terms and not because the other party was dragging him down. Lu Yun looked at this young man, and a trace of a smile appeared on his face. Perhaps the person he did not think highly of the most was the one who truly cared about the flowing cloud realm. The world was always so mysterious, and the human heart was even more difficult to understand. It was always difficult to know what a person was thinking. What was his bottom line? What kind of choice would he make when faced with greater temptations? However, none of this was important. It was as if the current situation was already very good. The flowing cloud realm had reached an unprecedented height. If Xiaoyang wanted to cancel the contract, the world spirit would not think much of it. If the flowing cloud realm was in trouble in the future, this young man would definitely help if he could. In the flowing cloud realm, Xiaoyang had also done a lot. It could be said that the reason this world was able to become a medium world was because of Xiaoyang's strength. However, in the end, Xiaoyang did not mention canceling the contract so that his breakthrough would no longer be restricted. Instead, after talking about some unimportant matters, they went to help each other. In actuality, from how Xiaoyang saw it, it was hard to say how fast one would break through. It was just a matter of how one treated it. If you place too much importance on some things, you'll only bring endless troubles to yourself in the end. Moreover, he was one with the flowing cloud realm. If he broke through, then he would also receive a lot of feedback, receiving quite a bit of benefits. As for its weakness, it was very simple as well. It was that the flowing cloud realm would constantly divide his cultivation, causing the speed of his breakthroughs to slow down. It was true that they complemented each other, but at the initial stage, it might be a burden to each other. Xiaoyang didn't care about these things. He believed that with his ability, raising a flowing cloud world wouldn't be a problem. Moreover, if the grade and strength of the flowing cloud realm could not be improved, how could he ascend to the 3,000 major worlds with peace of mind? The current flowing cloud realm could be said to be supported by Xiaoyang alone. He was the pillar. If he was gone, and this world had not yet grown up, it would be like a lamb in this world that was surrounded by wolves. It would not be long before it was completely devoured. Xiaoyang had already thought about these problems when he returned from the Inflame realm. Even if he wanted to leave, he had to arrange everything properly. Thinking about that, Xiaoyang couldn't help but feel a headache. There were many things in the world, and as the ruler of this world, he naturally had to consider every detail properly. Following this, Xiaoyang headed to the Western Front to investigate the development of the Furious River and see how it was progressing. With Chu Taiyin supervising and a few others assisting, he could see a huge ravine forming. The ravine, that stretched for more than 10,000 kilometers, was a prototype. Looking at the huge riverbed, Xiaoyang could only smile. Based on this speed, it would probably take some time before it was completed. The soil that had been dug out had also formed a thick wall on both sides of the river. Leader Xiao. Chu Taiyin saw this and walked over, greeting him with a smile. Xiaoyang nodded with a smile and clasped his fists. Senior. Chu Taiyin only laughed heartily. Looking at Xiaoyang, she felt very comfortable. Xiaoyang had always been very courteous. As the saying goes, those who are stronger are the teachers. Now, Xiaoyang had become the #1 person in the flowing cloud world, whether it was in terms of strength or identity. However, it was the same as when they first met. It'll probably take at least half a month to complete, Chu Taiyin said meaningfully. In order to dig out a place for the Furious River, they had used a lot of resources and manpower. There were even many cultivators among them. The lunar sect could be said to have gone all out, including the Extreme Yang sect, Dark Night Divine Land, and Northern Light City. One day, Chu Taiyin had nothing to do and asked about it. Only then did she know that the wealth used to open up the Furious River was comparable to the income of the lunar sect in a year. Fortunately, the Northern Light City was paying for it. Otherwise, with their strength, they wouldn't be able to take on such a heavy responsibility. Letting the Furious River land could be said to be the most important thing in the flowing cloud world. In addition, everyone was working together, so it was not that strenuous to do things. However, the two heroes of the Sun family were still depressed about this for a long time. They knew that if they built the Furious River, the wealth of their Northern Light City would be depleted. However, this was still okay. Most of the wealth would flow into their own pockets. If they had more resources, they would be able to cultivate their sect's cultivators faster. Only by thinking like this could they feel more comfortable. The sooner the better, Xiaoyang said with a smile. Chu Taiyin nodded and said, Sun Dishing also hopes so. Xiaoyang was taken aback for a moment and then laughed. He felt very helpless. Northern Light City had indeed accumulated a lot in the past few years. However, after several battles, they had also burned a lot of wealth. Their place was already barren. Now that they were making a big move, it was normal for them to be a little reluctant. However, Sun Dishing and Sun, Yukai, didn't mention this in front of him. From this, it could be seen that they could solve it. Naturally, he didn't need to worry. What Xiaoyang was really worried about was their cultivation. After all, cultivation and lifespan were linked. The core people from back then had already stepped into the martial emperor realm. On the other hand, they were still 7th order martial kings. This level was not enough. Moreover, compared to their lifespan, they were still far from it. After the two heroes of the Sun family, it would be difficult to find someone who could compare to them. Speed up, but don't make any mistakes, Xiaoyang said in a deep voice. Chapter 29:16. The importance of the raging river was self-evident. No one wanted to have any problems with it. Moreover, the raging river was arrogant and unruly. Now that it had fallen into the flowing cloud realm, it probably had a lot of complaints. Therefore, if they could handle the small problems well, they couldn't be careless. When the time came, some small problems could become an excuse for the raging river. Once it got angry, the unlucky ones would be the cultivators on both sides. Even Chu Tain, who was overseeing this place, would be at a disadvantage. We have a good grasp of this matter. Chu Tain smiled bitterly. Although they had only seen the raging river in the mountain river map, they could tell from this Lord's expression that it wasn't easy to deal with. In the future, you will have to spend time with the raging river. If you can merge with it, the benefits will be endless. However, you must be on guard. It didn't come from the flowing cloud realm. Xiao Yang's voice became more serious. Xiao Yang didn't know what the Yin Flame spirit used to convince the raging river to come here. Who knows? The raging river might be a hidden chess piece. Therefore, only by being on guard could they avoid mistakes. It was naturally impossible to pry some answers out of Nuhi's mouth. That guy was like a stone in a latrine, smelly and hard. Moreover, Xiao Yang only wanted it to be able to protect the peace of the Western Front. As long as there were other people with ulterior motives, he could turn a blind eye to them. As for whether or not the Yin Flame realm would counterattack, Xiao Yang wasn't worried at all. Without a few hundred years, the Yin Flame realm wouldn't be able to recover. The current Yin Flame realm still had a long way to go if they wanted to challenge the Four Realm Alliance. It wouldn't be that easy. On the surface, Xiao Yang's group had defeated the Mo family and the Gathering Fire Alliance in 2 battles. It seemed that they had only lost 2/3 of their strength. However, that wasn't the case. Instead, they had broken their spines. After witnessing Xiao Yang's power, the Yin Flame realm's only rank 6 powerhouse, Ping Chensheng, probably wouldn't have such thoughts. Even if there were people who added fuel to the fire, it would be difficult to shake Ping Chensheng's cautious nature. Therefore, Xiao Yang didn't have to worry about this problem at all. Therefore, this period of time was also a great opportunity for them to recuperate and solve these potential problems. However, Xiao Yang didn't have the energy to care about what happened to the raging river. Therefore, they could only see if Chu Tain had the ability to subdue it. These things were more or less risky, but if they were not allowed to face these things, then the things that followed would be even more dangerous. Chu Tain solemnly nodded and said, "I understand." From Sun Dishing's words, First Lunar also learned that the Furious River had already gained sentience. In that case, it would not be easy to subdue such stubborn spiritual beings. However, Chu Tain had always been competitive. In the eyes of others, this matter might be very difficult, but in his eyes it was a challenging thing. If he could succeed, the sense of accomplishment it would bring would be extraordinary. Even Xiao Gongzhu found it difficult to subdue a spiritual being, but he had subdued it. This made people feel different. Xiao Yang gave a few more instructions to continue to widen and deepen the riverbed. Then he returned to North Light City. Because Chu Tain was supervising the setting up of the raging river on the Western Front and had done an excellent job, he didn't have to worry too much about the matters on the other side. Therefore, Xiao Yang also told Sun Dishing to pass down the order that he was going to preach in the following days. The experience and insights he had were extraordinary. If he could enlighten a few disciples, it would be a great blessing. When this news spread out, the entire drifting cloud world began to boil. It had been a few years since Xiao Gongzhu had last preached. It could be said that every time Xiao Gongzhu preached, many people would benefit from it. There was even one person who broke through during the battle. Due to all these reasons, people had no choice but to believe Xiao Gongzhu's priceless advice. If they could comprehend it, it would be a great opportunity. For a time, many people began to rush to Baixing City. As for the cultivators who were building the raging river on the Western Front, after hearing this, they felt rather helpless. Many people wanted to go, but they all went to ask their own sects to see if it was possible. No one went without permission. Of course, Sun Dishing also knew the importance of Xiao Yang's preaching, so he made some adjustments in the personnel on the Western Front. Generally speaking, Xiao Yang's preaching lasted for 10 days. Therefore, it was not bad to stagger them to listen to the Tao. In the following days, Xiaoyang also began to preach at ease and talk about his cultivation experience. There were no shortcuts on the path of cultivation, but the great Tao might be covered, so people needed to help dispel the clouds and see the sun. Xiaoyang would not take the initiative to do it. Instead, he would let them discover it, tell them the method, and let them do it themselves. This time, not only the people from the flowing cloud boundary came to preach. Even many people from the sword heart boundary and the sun snow boundary came. Last time, Luo Rong broke through to the martial emperor boundary here. After the news spread, everyone understood that Xiaoyang's preaching was indeed different. It was easy for people to benefit. This time, Luo Rong did not leave because he came to congratulate him, so he also listened below. After tasting the sweetness of it once, he naturally wanted to have a second taste. Shen Wushuang sat with Luo Rong. Now, Shen Wushuang had also put away his cheeky smile. If they were face to face, he could tease shamelessly. However, when it came to serious matters, he would not fool around. Today, the square was even more crowded. There were cultivators everywhere, and there were no empty seats. After Xiaoyang finished talking about what he had learned, he would also deliberately answer one or two people's questions repeatedly. After all, the questions he asked were more general. As for some details, he could only use the method of breaking down the surface and ask people of different realms separately to answer their doubts. In a short span of 3 days, the flowing cloud boundary had another martial emperor. Yi 15 of the Dark Night Holy Land had successfully condensed a spiritual meridian. With Xiaoyang's protection, he directly broke through to the martial emperor boundary. As soon as the news spread, more people came one after another, wanting to ask for the preaching so that their cultivation could improve further. However, everything in the world was about opportunity, and the path of cultivators was even more so. If the opportunity had not arrived, it could not be forced. However, this did not prevent the preaching square from being overcrowded and difficult to find. Chapter 29:17. Xiaoyang only preached in the morning every day, but many people simply did not leave. They sat where they were and cultivated, hoping to have a place to listen to the Tao the next day. Xiaoyang also noticed this problem, so he asked Sun Dishing to issue a new policy. No one was allowed to stay in the venue after the preaching. Otherwise, it would be troublesome if the same group of people came to listen to the preaching all the time. Many people came in high spirits, but they could not listen to the Tao. That was also a great pity. If they did not gain anything from listening to the Tao and could not be enlightened, it would be disgusting if they kept occupying the seats. Sun Dishing also put in a lot of effort to come up with a series of measures to ensure that every cultivator who came to Baixing City could take turns to enter the preaching field. This method was both praised and criticized. Those who came early naturally jumped and cursed. Those who could not squeeze in were also very relieved. This trip was not in vain. Being able to listen to the Tao was enough. Sun Dishing had also suggested that Baixing City should be fully open to the public, making the huge Baixing City into Xiaoyang's teaching field. However, this was quickly rejected. After all, Baixing City was now the second base of Borealis City. It could be said that most government affairs were placed in Baixing City. If it was fully opened, it would disrupt this deployment. Although Sun Dishing and Sun Yukai did not go to listen to the preaching, they smiled more these few days. First, many outstanding juniors in the Drifting Cloud realm had some breakthroughs after their path seeking, so the bottleneck that had troubled them for a long time no longer existed. Second, cultivators from all over came to listen to the Tao. They would all buy and sell things. This gave Borealis City, whose finances were already tight because of the construction of the Furious River, a lot of income. At least, their finances did not seem so tight anymore. On the 10th day, after Luo Rong heard the Tao, there was another phenomenon. There were signs of a breakthrough. Xiaoyang looked up and saw that Luo Rong was breaking through again. He was stunned. This works too. Shen Wushuang was sitting next to him. When he saw this scene, the corners of his mouth could not help but twitch. Back then, Luo Rong had broken through to the martial emperor realm because he had listened to Xiao Yang's teachings. Now it was the same for him. Unrivaled God could not figure it out either. The Tao imparted by Xiao Yang was indeed intriguing, but he did not have much of an understanding of it. How could Luo Rong break through just like that? No matter how one looked at it, this matter was very mysterious. Xiao Yang was also protecting him. Since they were allies, there was no reason for him not to help. What's more, this was his territory. Many people cried out in surprise. Those who had seen Luo Rong before were even more astonished. Luo Rong had never disappointed anyone. Soon after, Sun Dishing began to lead the crowd to leave in an orderly manner, leaving this huge place empty for Luo Rong to break through. In the afternoon, Luo Rong successfully broke through. He stood up and cupped his hands. "Thank you, Lord Xiao. You comprehended it yourself." Xiao Yang also smiled and cupped his hands. Luo Rong had always been a person who did not reveal his talents. However, his secret growth was truly terrifying. "Stop bragging to each other. Luo Rong, just tell me if you're Xiao Yang shill," Unrivaled God said rather gloomily. Xiao Yang and Luo Rong both burst into laughter when they heard that. The first time might have been a coincidence, but the second time was the same. It really did seem to be the case. However, this really was a coincidence. "If I can break through as a shill, please inform me immediately the next time Lord Xiao teaches," Luo Rong said with a very serious expression. Xiao Yang also had a serious look on his face as he said, "All right." Unrivaled God was even more gloomy now. He looked at the two of them, and his mood became much worse. These fellows were truly unfathomable. After the three of them teased each other for a while, they went their separate ways. Unrivaled God returned to the God realm, while Luo Rong returned to the Sun Snow realm. They were on the same journey. Unrivaled God was rather gloomy along the way. Unrivaled God could not figure out what was going on. It seemed like Luo Rong would gain something every time he came to listen to the sermon, but he knew nothing about it. After the news of Luo Rong's breakthrough spread, Xiao Yang was the one who benefited the most in the end. However, he benefited from his reputation. Many martial emperors felt that they should listen to Xiao Yang's sermon the next time. Perhaps they would benefit greatly from listening to the sermon. It was even possible for them to break through. Even the God Emperor could not help but be moved when he heard it. Who was it? Luo Rong, who had broken through from rank 3 to rank for martial emperor. That was truly shocking. Furthermore, the person who taught the Tao was Xiao Yang. As such, it was quite intriguing. Luo Rong seemed to have taken all the benefits. As the sermon ended, the cultivators from all over began to leave. Of course, there were also many who were curious about the middle peak and went to take a look. Under Sun Dishing and Sun Yotsai's arrangements, people began to move into the 9 peaks of the middle peak. Mu Yang was currently standing guard there, like a stabilizing needle in the sea. The Furious River site on the western front was also being completed. Xiao Yang even went to take a look. In the end, he came up with an accurate timeline. It would be completed in 3 days. By then, the Furious River could be placed there. Once the defensive line was completed, he would be able to go on his way with peace of mind and train outside. During these 3 days, Xiao Yang also visited the other 3 worlds. This kind of social interaction was not bad. Of course, he had to let them know. After he left, he still needed them to take care of the drifting cloud realm. When he met the God Emperor, there was also a flash of battle intent. They were of the same level. The God Emperor was also curious about Xiao Yang's cultivation base, so he wanted to fight. However, that was only for a moment. They were now the lords of their respective worlds. How could they fight as they pleased? Therefore, the outcome of this matter was naturally left unsettled. After taking care of everything, it was time for the Furious River to land. Xiao Yang went to the western front as scheduled. Looking at the huge riverbed, it was like a trace left behind by a giant dragon. Magnificent. Huge. The important people of the drifting cloud realm also arrived. The landing of the furious river was a big matter. They naturally would not miss it. Of course, they also had a mission, which was to ensure that the furious river would not sweep across the two sides. If there were signs of it happening, they would have to act immediately to stop it. Otherwise, if the furious river overflowed, who knew how many living beings would suffer because of it? Last time, when the 9 peaks of the mountain landed, the spiritual energy in the flowing cloud realm became denser. How would it change this time? Chapter 29:18. Everyone was looking forward to seeing what would happen to the flowing cloud realm after the raging river was dug out. The belief of becoming stronger was deeply rooted in everyone's hearts. Not only did they want to become stronger themselves, but they also wanted the world they were in to become stronger as well. If it was just 1 or 2 people, they might be able to hold on for a while. However, that would be putting all of their treasures on one person, which was very dangerous. If anything were to happen, the world behind him would most likely fall into an irrecoverable state. It wasn't that they didn't trust Xiaoyang, but they felt that the flowing cloud realm could continue to grow stronger. And now, the addition of these blessed enclaves was one of the necessary prerequisites for them to meet. Looking at the massive ravine, the smile on Mu Yang's face became wider. From this, it could be seen that the flowing cloud realm was truly of one mind. In such a short period of time, they were able to create such a spectacle. The amount of manpower and material resources required to do so was extraordinary. Digging out the raging river required more than just manpower. There were many formations set up inside, as well as many spiritual items, all for the sake of stability. The raging river wasn't an ordinary river. They only needed to dig out a channel and fill it with water. The raging river had a spirit, and if they wanted to nurture it, they would have to pay a great price. How could they not care about all of this? Xiao Chongqing's hands were behind his back, and he looked like an old man as he stared at the things in the riverbed. The corners of his eyes unconsciously twitched. In order to create this raging river, the Xiao family had also invested many treasures. It was all for the flowing cloud realm, so how could he be stingy? Although the Northern Light City had also given some compensation, it was still far from enough. It was because he knew the state of the Northern Light City that Xiao Chongsheng had made such a decision. If everything was done by the Northern Light City, it wouldn't take long for this colossal existence to be emptied out. At that time, if the Northern Light City fell, the other large factions would also be greatly affected. Looking around, Xiao Chongqing also discovered something. The ownership of this raging river would most likely belong to the lunar sect in the future. Perhaps this place would even become a place for First Lunar alone. But then again, these were all unimportant. As long as everyone was working for the prosperity of the flowing cloud world, it was fine. After taking care of the 2 big troubles, the Wanshou realm and the Inflame realm, one after another, it seemed to be calm and peaceful, but who could say for sure whether there were still some unknown enemies? Moreover, no one was paying attention to the internal strife in the flowing cloud world. This was because Xiaoyang had made a good start. It was not a skill to be arrogant in one's own world. If one was really powerful, one could go to other worlds and snatch 1 or 2 blessed lands and place them in one's own world. That was true skill. I've troubled everyone during this period of time. Xiaoyang cupped his hands and thanked everyone with a smile. Chu Taiyin only smiled. Hard work was nothing. As long as she could see hope and her efforts were not in vain, it was worth it. Moreover, as cultivators, how could they be so easily exhausted? After a few more pleasantries, Xiaoyang let out a low roar and formed a seal with his hands. The mountain river map slowly rose and floated in front of Xiaoyang. They were now in the middle of the raging river. When the raging river landed, the water would flow in both directions in the shortest amount of time. It would not be so turbulent that it would cause trouble on both sides. Of course, this was impossible. After all, the powerhouses standing here were not to be trifled with. They were here to guard this place in case something unexpected happened. Then, with a low shout, the mountain and river of the gods of earth and vale shone even brighter with profound light. A strand of silver water flowed out of the painting. When the river water fell into the riverbed, a burst of intense, white smoke rose up. The ground was burning at an extremely fast speed and turned into ashes in the blink of an eye. Even if it was soil, it would be burned to ashes. When everyone saw this, they couldn't help but gasp. This river was so domineering that it could burn the soil. It was really powerful. If it really released all of it, how terrible would it be? Chu Taiying frowned slightly. This was obviously the spirit of the raging river throwing a tantrum. It did not restrain its divine ability, and even seemed to be fanning the flames. That was why such a situation happened. Thinking of this, Chu Taiying's expression became very ugly. It seemed that it was almost impossible to get along peacefully with the spirit of the raging river in the future. There would probably be a lot of conflicts between them. This was a good job, but also a troublesome thing. Although they all felt great pressure from receiving the one mountain and the 9 peaks, it was only temporary. He did not know how long he and the raging river would be together in the future. It was unknown what kind of problems would occur in such a confrontation. Thinking of this, Chu Taiying felt rather helpless. However, this also gave birth to a thought in his bones. That was, no matter how untamed the spirit of the raging river was, he, Chu Taiying, would give it a try to see if he could beat it into submission and make it submit completely. Impudent! Seeing that the green smoke was getting bigger and bigger, Xiaoyang frowned and shouted coldly. To Xiaoyang, it was understandable for the spirit of the raging river to throw a tantrum. After all, it had left its hometown to serve here, so how could it not have any resentment? However, there had to be a limit to everything. If it went too far, then Xiaoyang could only use the unthinkable and let Xiaohu swallow it. As for the riverbed that he had spent a lot of money and manpower to build, there was no harm in treating it as a big river. If the spirit of the raging river cooperated, everything would be hard to say. If it insisted on being stubborn, so what if he used some methods that he could not use? Following this shout, the rising green smoke became much smaller. Previously, the spirit of the raging river had already tasted Xiaoyang's methods. If it went too far, with Xiaoyang's nature, it would not have an easy time. Even though the spirit of the raging river was unwilling, it could only try its best to restrain its temper. Seeing that everything slowly returned to normal, everyone's originally anxious hearts slowly relaxed. They had heard of Nuhi's methods. At that time, if he really turned his back on them and forced them to fight, the price they would have to pay would not be small. It was naturally a good thing that everything could pass peacefully. The river water surged to both ends. The speed did not seem fast, but it had been stretched to the maximum. The raging river's water diagram seemed to be endless as it poured into the ditch. Chapter 29:19. Everyone looked at the cold, silver-gray river water and felt even more shocked. It was the first time they had seen such a river, and it was quite a sight. The in-flame world was indeed a unique world, and the mountains and rivers it possessed were even more so. Muyang frowned slightly. Although the river water looked like river water, he could sense that it contained flames. If he was careless and allowed the river water to stick to him, he might not even notice when he was burnt to ashes. It was the first time Muyang had seen such a sinister river water, so he clicked his tongue in wonder. Although Muyang cultivated fire, it was yang fire, so it was completely different from the raging river's element. They might even counter each other. Now he could understand why Xiaoyang had done this. The aura of the Yin flames within the 9 peaks was gradually changing, and it would probably assimilate with the flowing cloud world in a dozen or so years. However, the raging river was different. It had gained sentience, so it probably wouldn't assimilate. Of course, once the raging river was assimilated, it would probably lose its original effects. That would more or less be unnecessary. Xiaoyang probably didn't want that to happen, which was why he had sent Chu Taiying to try. Chu Taiying's joy was evident on his face. He could sense that the river water's aura was naturally close to his path. Perhaps his fortuitous encounter was within. Although reaching an agreement with the spirit of the raging river and complementing each other was an extremely difficult thing, Chu Taiying was confident. However, Chu Taiying had enough confidence. He believed that after a long time, he would definitely be able to do it. Xiao Yang's arrangement was quite ingenious, and it was admirable. You better behave yourself. I'm not as easy to talk to as the spirit of the Yin flames. Xiao Yang's face immediately changed when he saw the spirit of the raging river appear. The spirit of the raging river looked back at Xiao Yang, and the hatred and resentment in its eyes were not hidden at all. Looking at the huge ravine below and the many things set up in it, the spirit of the raging river sneered, "You clearly need my help, so why are you acting like this?" Since the other party was so serious about this matter, it was clear that he was very important. In the future, the role it would play would also be extraordinary. From this information, the spirit of the raging river could analyze many situations that were beneficial to it. Therefore, the current him appeared to be somewhat unbridled. In any case, the other party was the one who needed his help, so it was understandable for him to ask for too much sometimes. It's not bad that you think you're important. However, have you ever thought that I appoint people based on favoritism? If you don't behave yourself, I'll let you become nourishment for my heavenly flame. Wouldn't that be safer? Xiao Yang sneered. Instantly, the spirit of the raging river froze. It couldn't help but think of what happened in the Yin flame world. If it wasn't for the timely appearance of the Yin flame spirit, it might have really been devoured by the heavenly fire. Xiao Yang had an indifferent expression. In order to allow the raging river to descend, he had indeed mobilized the entire flowing cloud world and paid a considerable price. But if this was exchanged for uncertain factors or even backfired, he would rather not have such help and abandon it like a pair of worn-out shoes. Moreover, when he went out in the future, he would naturally seek stability. Xiao, who had been following him the entire time, which was why Xiao Yang felt even more at ease. "You're unreasonable," the spirit of the raging river snorted in dissatisfaction. For such a ruthless person, it was impossible to use anything to threaten him. As a result, the spirit of the raging river felt very hopeless. Why did it encounter a person like that? It was truly tragic. Moreover, with its current abilities, it couldn't fight back and could only be manipulated. Thinking of what the Yin flame spirit had said to it, no matter how unwilling the spirit of the raging river was, it could only grit its teeth and swallow it down. Afterwards, the spirit of the raging river no longer paid any attention to Xiao Yang. It turned around and poured into the raging river, beginning to wander around. It didn't matter where it went to look at the scenery, as long as it wasn't here. Seeing Xiao Yang, it felt extremely worried. As the ruler of a world, he was so narrow-minded. It was truly laughable. Right now, the raging river understood its current situation. It was living under someone else's roof, so no matter how many thoughts it had to suppress them. Otherwise, if he said something wrong, he would be doomed eternally. It might even suffer quite a bit. Seeing that the spirit of the raging river stopped making a ruckus, Xiao Yang completely opened the mountain and river map and sped up the flow of water. The raging river was so large that if it continued to flow at such a slow pace, it would probably take a lot of time to completely fill it up. Xiao Yang did not want to waste time. Moreover, there were experts protecting him. If anything happened, they would be able to deal with it quickly and not affect the two shores. Seeing the sudden turbulence in the river, Mu Yang and Chu Taiying were on full alert. They knew that there was going to be a huge risk ahead. As time passed, more and more water accumulated in the middle, and it seemed like it was going to spread to the two shores. Mu Yang and Chu Taiying acted immediately as well. Barriers appeared on both sides of the river, blocking the water that was gushing out. During this time, Chu Taiying even scooped up some water, which instantly turned into flames. He did not feel any pain, but he could see his skin becoming charred black and losing his life force. This caused Chu Taiying to feel incredibly shocked, but he quickly calmed down and put out the flames. Mu Yang's lips twitched when he saw the scene as well. Such a technique was indeed shocking, but at the same time it made people feel quite helpless. It was almost impossible to target it. For the time being, he couldn't think of a way to smooth it out. Half a day later, the raging river was finally settled in the flowing cloud world. Looking at the surging river, Xiaoyang smiled and nodded in satisfaction. Even though there were some small incidents, it was not much. However, how to make the raging river change its habits and sincerely serve the flowing cloud world was still a big problem. If this problem was not solved, it would be a hidden danger in the future. Thank you all for your help today, allowing the raging river to land safely. Xiaoyang smiled and cupped his fists in thanks. Chapter 2920. Leader Xiao, what are you talking about? We are all from the flowing cloud world. It is natural for us to contribute to the development of the flowing cloud world. Yi19 smiled. After going through these two things, Yi19's foundation became more and more stable. At the same time, he understood that everything Xiaoyang did was for the flowing cloud world and not for himself. 19 Saint Master is right. Leader, don't treat us as outsiders. Ji-Fei smiled. Baldy and the others also started to agree. They all expressed their own opinions. The flowing cloud world had already started to grow stronger. It was only a matter of time before it completely matured. The flames of war had yet to burn again. This meant that there were still many peaceful days ahead. If they worked hard during this period of time, they might even be able to catch up. Right now, the flowing cloud realm was like a healthy child, growing stronger and stronger with each passing day. Let's hold the celebration banquet today. How about it? Xiaoyang said with a smile. When they returned from the expedition to the Thousand Beast World, due to the disaster of the Inflame World, the celebration banquet turned into reminiscence. After the expedition to the Inflame World, the Sword Heart World and the God World were both held. Only the Flowing Cloud World was silent. Xiaoyang didn't say anything. Naturally, they wouldn't ask. After all, the Flowing Cloud World had experienced too many things. It wasn't very suitable. Great! Instantly, everyone cheered. They were very satisfied with this matter. Then, everyone left and headed towards the Northern Light City. As for Chu Taiyin, she was left behind by Xiaoyang. He naturally had many special instructions regarding the Furious River. After all, Chu Taiyin would be with the Furious River Spirit for a long time. If she didn't know anything, it would be easy for something to happen. I think you must have felt some clues. Xiaoyang looked at the calm river and said in a low voice. Although the place he was at was calm, he didn't know if the place where the Furious River Spirit was at was calm. Now, it wouldn't be strange if it caused a huge commotion. It had been suppressed in the mountain river map for too long. As long as it didn't harm the living beings on both sides of the river, Xiaoyang would let it do whatever it wanted. If the innocent were to be harmed, then this matter would have a different flavor and would need to be dealt a heavy blow. Very strange. Chu Taiyin nodded and could not help but sigh. Xiaoyang only smiled. Because of these characteristics, the meaning of the Furious River's existence was different. If they managed it well, the Western Front would become as stable as Mount Tai. Unless the other party's strength was too much, it would be impossible to invade the interior. In this way, due to the geographical location, the identity of the first lunar would also change. The strategic significance of the Furious River could be said to be quite important. But I like this kind of evil. The yin qi is very heavy, which is very beneficial to my cultivation. As for the hidden fire, I have some techniques that I can cultivate. As for how much I can fuse with it, only the heavens know. Chu Taiyin said with a bitter smile. A lot of words sounded simple, but how could it be easy to actually do it? However, Chu Taiyin was not obsessed with these things. In his opinion, it was fine as long as he did his best. Xiaoyang nodded. It seemed that the decision to give this place to Chu Taiyin was correct. Looking at the entire flowing cloud world, no one was more suitable to stay here than Chu Taiyin. Every decision had to be made after careful consideration before a decision could be made. If there was a slight mistake, it was hard to say what would happen. Xiaoyang was also able to grasp these things. Some of the concerns in his heart had already disappeared, and he no longer put them in his heart. I don't know where the Furious River's spirit is now. In the future, you have to have a good relationship with it to be able to truly control the Furious River. Xiaoyang instructed. Chu Taiyin nodded. He was naturally clear about this. If the Furious River had no spirit, he could use his yin qi to fuse with it. At that time, he could easily control it. However, if it had intelligence, it would be different. The Furious River's spirit is very stubborn. Back then, it was almost refined by Xiaohua, but it didn't change its mind. If it weren't for some changes, it wouldn't have obediently followed me to the flowing cloud world. Xiaoyang said helplessly. It could even be said that it was difficult to forcefully subdue it. The yin flame spirit was stubborn to such an extent. The Furious River spirit was also considered to be born with the heavens and earth. It had lived for an incomparably long time. Perhaps its death could be considered a kind of relief for it. Chu Taiyin frowned slightly. If that was the case, it would be really difficult to subdue the yin flame spirit. It seemed that what he was facing next would also be a huge challenge, and it might even be difficult to complete. Thinking of this, Chu Taiyin also felt that his body was full of energy. It was exciting to do such an impossible thing. If he did nothing all the time, it would be worrying and uncomfortable. Xiaoyang chuckled. It seemed that Chu Taiyin, this old senior, had also begun to have some drive. This was a good thing. Although Chu Taiyin had lived for a few thousand years, for his current cultivation, a few thousand years was only equivalent to the prime of his life. Xiaoyang's cultivation of less than 100 years could only be considered a young man. Just how long was a cultivator's life? There will be a way. Chu Taiyin smiled. He was also confident about this. Xiaoyang nodded and said, "There's one more thing. I don't know if the Furious River's spirit is sincere or not. You have to think about what it said. Perhaps it's a traitor. I understand. In the end, I'm someone from the flowing cloud world. Even if the great Tao is compatible, I can't be someone from the yin flame world. I can't do anything to harm the flowing cloud world." Chu Taiyin said with great certainty. Xiaoyang nodded with a smile, but he was also thinking about it. In the future, Chu Taiyin and the yin flame's spirit might be together day and night. It would be difficult to say if something would happen. "I just hope that I won't chase you out of the flowing cloud world in the future," Xiaoyang said and sighed helplessly. Chu Taiyin was not angry and said, "I'm a person, it's a spirit. If I'm led astray by it, how can I stay in the flowing cloud world?" The two of them looked at each other and immediately laughed out loud. As cultivators, they had the mentality that they were the rulers of all things. If they couldn't even do this, then there was no point in saying anything else. How sorrowful would it be to lose one's heart to the influence of a fae? "Let's go. We'll return to the Northern Light City first." Xiaoyang smiled. Since Chu Taiyin also understood this, there was naturally no need for him to say anything. Chapter 29-21. The current situation of the flowing cloud realm could be said to be very good. A conservative estimate was that in 100 years, this land would be filled with martial emperors. By then, Xiaoyang could leave with peace of mind. Even without him, the drifting cloud realm would be able to establish itself in the middle world. Who knows, he might even become the overlord of a region. In addition to their alliance with the God Realm, the Sword Heart Realm, and the Sun Snow Realm, it was possible for them to become a giant in the future. However, no one could say for sure what would happen in the future. The most important thing now was the drifting cloud realm was still very weak now. If they provoked a giant or were coveted, it would only take a day for them to be destroyed. On the way back, Xiaoyang told Chu Taiyin about the yin flame realm. For example, how the people there were like and what were their characteristics. It was only after he understood all of this that he might be able to gain some inspiration and even find the right medicine to take down the raging river spirit. However, this was just a guess. How could it be easy to realize? With the spirit of the furious river's stubborn character, it was almost impossible to turn it over in a short period of time. Therefore, this could only be slowly worn down with endless time. Perhaps some different situations would occur. However, this was just a matter of probability. How could it be easy to achieve? When they returned to the North Light City, the banquet was already full of guests. When they were preparing to let the furious river land, Xiaoyang had already instructed Sun Yukai to send invitations to the other 3 realms so that they could join in the fun. His meaning was very clear. He wanted to thank everyone for their help in the past. Princess Mingzhu of the God Realm was in closed-door cultivation, and Shen Wushuang had just returned. Therefore, King Zhao and King Qin came. Li Fengmu came from the Sword Heart Realm, because Xiaoyang had boasted before that he would not see Xiaoyang for a day if his realm was unequal. When Xiaoyang and Li Fengmu talked about this, they just laughed it off. Bai Jian was stubborn sometimes. He might be even more stubborn than the spirit of the furious river. Xiaoyang also knew that Bai Jianxin's arrogance was not due to his lack of confidence. His talent was just as terrifying. It probably wouldn't take long for them to meet. As for the Sun-Snow realm, Luo Rong went into seclusion to stabilize his realm after returning. The one who came was their master, Luo Ji. Clan Master Xiao, it has been a long time since we last met. Now, you have already grown to the point where us old fellows have to look up to you, Luo Ji said with a chuckle. At the same time, Luo Ji also looked at Ji Fei. In the past, he thought that Ji Fei would suffer if he followed the flowing cloud world. But now, it seemed like he was overthinking things. The current Xiaoyang could be said to be unparalleled in the limelight. He was almost comparable to a god emperor. In fact, everyone was well aware that no matter how high Xiaoyang's realm was or how powerful he was, the backbone of the 4-realm alliance would always be the god emperor. Nothing could be more prestigious than that. No matter how fierce Xiaoyang was, he was only a fierce general. I have to thank you this time. Otherwise, I don't know when Luo Rong would be able to break through. Luo Ji smiled. Xiaoyang waved his hand nonchalantly and said, "This is because Luo Rong is talented and has accumulated a lot of experience." Although Xiaoyang did have the credit of giving Luo Rong pointers, and for a martial emperor, pointers were sometimes different. If it wasn't for those refreshing pointers, it would be harder for Luo Rong to break through to the next realm than to reach the heavens. After exchanging greetings for a while, the celebration feast officially began. Everyone, thank you for fighting together for peace. That's why we are at peace today. This toast is for all of you. Xiaoyang raised his wine cup and said with a smile. Immediately everyone cheered. Clan Master Xiao is mighty. Cheers rose and fell one after another. Everyone knew in their hearts that if Xiaoyang had not chosen to make the first move, once the flames of war spread to their land, the final result would only be a complete defeat. In fact, it was even possible that in the end, the people would be plunged into misery and suffering or even collapse. At least, most of the people present wouldn't be able to sit here anymore. One should know that the 3 realms had suffered a great loss from the disaster of the Yin Flame world. Chen Mingho from the Drifting Cloud world and several martial emperors from the Sword Heart world, except for Li Fengmu and Bai Jian, were all killed. The old prime minister of the God world and 2 of the 4 divine generals were killed. Such a heavy loss was only the result of a blitzkrieg. If the battle continued, how serious would the casualties become? It was truly difficult to fathom. Tonight, everyone, let's eat and drink to our heart's content. We won't go home until we're drunk. Xiaoyang raised his cup again and smiled. Everyone also laughed and began to toast one after another. Since the invasion of the White Bear tribe from the Beast World, they had been in a depressed state. Most of them were even worried about their survival. Their heartstrings were even tighter. Now that the chaos in the Beast World and Yin Flame World was finally resolved, although there might be many unknown enemies in the future, that was a matter for the future. At least tonight, since Clan Master Xiao allowed them to drink in peace, they didn't have to worry anymore. Everyone was very happy now. It wasn't easy to obtain peace, ever since the calamity of the Flame world. Many of their friends had left them. Clan Master Xiao, don't break through too quickly. Otherwise, you'll never see Bai Jian again. Li Fengmu smiled bitterly and said. Xiao Yang glanced sideways and looked at Li Fengmu with some confusion. Why does Sword Masterly say that? Xiao Yang was very puzzled. Li Fengmu picked up his cup and drank it in one gulp. He said, Bai Jian has always been stubborn. What he says is absolutely true. Even if it was a joke at that time, if the whole world knew, he would take it seriously for the sake of his reputation. Hearing this, Xiao Yang smiled and shook his head. He naturally knew Bai Jian's nature. It could be said that if Bai Jian wasn't stubborn, he wouldn't have come to this step today. Of course, it was also possible that because of his stubbornness, the two of them, who had been through life and death together, would never be able to meet again. Sword Masterly, why worry too much? Bai Jian wants to break through, isn't it easy? Xiao Yang said indifferently. Li Fengmu shook his head and said, That's naturally for the best. But recently I also feel some differences. Bai Jian has become much more impetuous these few days. Clearly, there's a problem with his mentality. Regarding this, Li Fengmu was also helpless. This time, Xiao Yang could only say that he wanted to help, but couldn't. If he went to persuade him, Bai Jian would probably think that he was going to humiliate him. At that time, if he failed to persuade him, it would probably backfire and they would become enemies. Chapter 29-22. Plus, since Bai Jian said something like that, he naturally had to take responsibility for it. There were many things that couldn't be said out of impulse. If that was the case, there wouldn't be any credibility left. Plus, Bai Jian also paid attention to these things. Therefore, what he said was true. Xiao Yang didn't care about this. After all, with his current situation, he still needed to drag the entire drifting cloud boundary forward. Naturally, the speed of breaking through would be slower. Therefore, as long as Bai Jian wasn't stubborn, it was only a matter of time before they meet again. Bai Jian was competing. He had the arrogance of not wanting to fall behind others. Therefore, he said something like that to force himself to work hard. But many times, being anxious was something that couldn't be changed. Working hard was one thing, but opportunities were also something that couldn't be missed. As one's cultivation level increased, what they needed to improve was not only the strength of their physical body, but also the strength of their soul and knowledge. Once he comprehended it, he would be able to rush to an even higher realm. If they didn't understand, no matter how terrifying their cultivation level was, they would be stuck in the same place. They would be going around in circles and wasting their efforts. Although Bai Jian was stubborn, he wasn't someone with a one-track mind. Naturally, he understood these things very well. Therefore, Xiao Yang only thought about it for a while and didn't take it to heart. Sword Masterly, don't worry too much. That's Bai Jian, the Bai Jian who walked out of the sword scar abyss and broke through as easily as drinking water. Xiao Yang smiled. When Li Fengmu heard this, he immediately nodded. Speaking of which, it was indeed the case. Bai Jian was able to stand up again under such a terrible situation. Compared to before, what was the difference? Let's drink, let's drink. Li Fengmu smiled. Qin Wang and Zhao Wang raised their cups and began toasting. Qin Wang really admired Xiao Yang. If it weren't for him, the alliance of 4 realms would have changed greatly. The casualties would have been heavier. Qin Wang and Xiao Yang were also discussing some cultivation issues. Qin Wang had seen through it all. His status in the realm of the gods was indeed noble. However, in the 3,000 middle realms, it was nothing. Strength reigned supreme. This was an unchanging truth, no matter where one was. Although it was different in the divine world, it was only limited to the 3,000 small worlds. When he was in the 3,000 small worlds, Qin Wang's strength was not bad either. At that time, he was considered one of the top 10 people. However, in the 3,000 middle worlds, it was only a drop in the ocean. Gradually, the Duke of Qin drank more and more, and his speech started to become a little out of tune. He had always felt that his cultivation talent was only slightly inferior to his elder brother, the God Emperor. But who would have thought that the difference was so great? Princess Mingzhu was already a 6th-level martial emperor, but he was still a 4th-level martial emperor. In fact, Luo Rong and the others had surpassed them. In the past, the Duke of Qin had only suppressed these emotions in his heart. After drinking a bit more wine, he didn't use his spiritual energy to suppress them. That was why he was so outspoken. Speaking of this, Luo Ji also came over and expressed that she was also facing the same predicament. They were naturally happy about the growth of the younger generation. Now, it was indeed the world of the younger generation. However, what they were afraid of was that the younger generation was growing rapidly while they were still in the same place. Soon, it would be difficult for these old fellows to do anything. They could only retire and return to their hometowns. They felt that they could do something, but in the end, they were powerless. Li Fengmu seemed to be more open-minded. He didn't take these things to heart. In his opinion, the more outstanding the younger generation, the better. Moreover, Li Fengmu had long wanted to pass down the Heaven Sword. In this way, he wouldn't have to care about worldly affairs and could comprehend the sword in peace. However, how many things in the world would go smoothly? Bai Jian didn't want to care about worldly affairs, and Li Chuni wasn't enough to convince the masses. Therefore, he still had to continue to be the sword master. Everyone had their own unhappiness or things that they couldn't see through. This could only be said to be human nature. In this round, everyone drank until the sky turned dark. In addition, they didn't deliberately use their spiritual energy to suppress it. In the end, a few powerful figures were drunk. The new era that they had been waiting for had arrived. The dawn of hope was here, so everyone was happy. Naturally, they drank too much. In one night, all the good wine in North Light City and Baixing City was drunk clean. Even the good wine brought from the realm of the gods wasn't enough. In the end, a lot of good wine was brought over from Taiying sect and Taiyang sect. Everyone drank to their heart's content and was dead drunk. After suppressing their emotions for so long, once they started to vent, it was like a flood that couldn't be stopped. Sun Dishing brought many disciples over. Looking at the mess in front of him and the wine jars piled up like a mountain, he could only helplessly laugh bitterly. Soon after, Sun Dishing also laughed. This also meant that there were no internal or external troubles. That was why they could be like this. Many disciples also began to methodically help the guests to the guest rooms to rest. As for the powerful figures, they naturally couldn't be left behind. Sun Dishing looked at the drunk Sun Yukai and shook his head, helplessly. He would be very busy in the future. If Sun Dishing didn't have an important matter as an excuse, he would probably be like Sun Yukai and be forced to drink. If they were all drunk, who would be in charge of the affairs of the world? Xiao Yang hadn't drunk like this in a long time. At the same time, he felt a little regretful. If only Bai Jian and unrivaled God were here, he would be able to drink to his heart's content. Unfortunately, each of them had their own matters to attend to. Xiao Yang was drunk and slept for a full 7 days. He drank too much, and it was divine wine too. How could he not be drunk? Moreover, Xiao Yang was indeed overly exhausted during this period. Although he had been using his power to adjust, the exhaustion of his god soul could not be completely eliminated. Xiao Mang had been serving him all this time. At the same time, she was also a cultivator. When she sensed that the young master's aura was gradually becoming more solid and stable, she was no longer worried. Although he was resting like this, it was still considered a good thing. If Xiao Yang was sober on a normal day, how could he rest so peacefully when he had the world in his heart? Xiao Mang was also quite helpless and felt that the young master had really changed. In the past, Xiao Yang could be said to have done things his own way. Now that he was the leader, there were too many things for him to worry about. Moreover, he was very serious in everything he did. There was no prevarication. How could he not be tired when he had the world in his heart? 7 days later, Xiaoyang woke up and immediately felt his entire body relaxed and comfortable. He exhaled a mouthful of turbid air and felt the power in his body rise like a flying dragon. It was exhilarating. No way. Chapter 29-23. Xiaoyang rubbed his forehead in a rather gloomy manner. He could sense that he was about to break through. Who would have thought that after a night of drinking, he would have to break through to the next realm after waking up? This kind of thing was really mysterious, and it caught everyone off guard. However, it had only been a little over a month since Xiaoyang had broken through to Class 6, yet he was about to break through again. This speed could only be described as shocking. Is this the will of the heavens, so that by Jian and I can't meet again? Xiaoyang laughed bitterly at himself. If he broke through again, the chances of him meeting Bai Jian in the future would basically be zero. The difference between two cultivation levels was not so easy to catch up. Afterwards, Xiaoyang dismissed his thoughts and began to observe the flowing cloud world. He also knew that the matter was not as simple as it seemed on the surface. There was more to it than met the eye. Under careful observation, Xiaoyang discovered that the veins of the world had become slightly larger, and the river of fury that had landed recently had begun to merge with the fortune of the flowing cloud world. After seeing this, Xiaoyang understood what was going on. The drifting cloud world must have become even stronger after absorbing the raging river, which led to an increase in the grade of the world, which was why it was dragging him along with it. This was the feedback and pull that the flowing cloud world had given Xiaoyang. Now, Xiaoyang and the flowing cloud world could be said to be completely complementary. The strength of one side would definitely drag the other side along. Looks like breaking through really will be easy in the future. I just need to plunder a few more blessed lands from other places and let them in. Then wouldn't the speed of breaking through be much faster? Xiaoyang murmured to himself. That was indeed feasible. However, if he forcefully plunder, how is he any different from those who waged war to swallow up other worlds? That was just an idea in the end. It was difficult to make it happen. Of course, if other worlds dared to plot against the flowing cloud world, they could not blame Xiaoyang for being merciless. Xiaoyang would not take the initiative to provoke others. But if others wanted to provoke him, then they must be prepared for revenge. Indeed, that can be done. Lu Yin suddenly appeared in Xiaoyang's room and whispered. Xiaoyang was startled when he heard this. He immediately shook his head. He felt that his approach was still somewhat risky after all. Moreover, it was already very difficult for them to change the 9 peaks of a mountain and serve the raging river. If they were to come to the blessed enclave, they would be a burden. There was no other reason other than a lack of manpower. At that time, the world spirit would probably be overburdened and hurt its own foundation. You should have tasted the sweetness this time, but I hope you can suppress your realm and not break through. As Lu Yin spoke, his expression became much more serious. Xiaoyang nodded. He naturally understood what the other party meant. Right now, Xiaoyang had only just gained a firm foothold in the realm of the 6th order. If he rashly broke through to the 7th order, he was afraid that his realm would become unstable. In this way, it could be said to be a huge hidden danger. Once he broke through, the flowing cloud boundary would also become stronger, but it would easily become empty. The raging river had not completely merged into the flowing cloud boundary. If anything happened, the consequences would be unimaginable. Thinking of this, Xiaoyang felt a headache. Even if he wanted to break through now, he needed to think carefully. Other people's breakthrough was something they could only wish for, but he had to deliberately suppress it. How could he be happy? You don't have to worry. When your realm is completely stabilized, my side will also be similar. At that time, it won't be too late to break through together. Lu Yin said in a deep voice. Xiaoyang nodded. This matter could be put aside for the time being. You can go and see the spirit of the raging river. I'm sure the spirit of the Yin flame has mentioned it before. It's not a secret. However, you have to be careful. Don't fall into its trap. Immediately, Xiao Yang's expression became more serious as he said in a deep voice, "When he met the spirit of the Yin flame honestly, it was naturally to gain the other party's trust. However, after some things were said clearly, it was extremely likely to become a hidden danger. Therefore, he would warn him in advance to prevent any accidents from happening." Lu Yun nodded and said, "I understand. No matter how strong the spirit of the raging river is, it's still in my flowing cloud boundaries territory. If it wants to stir up any waves, it has to see if I agree or not." Although they were both spiritual beings, their situations were different. It could be said that if the spirit of the raging river wanted to develop in the long term, it would definitely need Lu Yun's help. Without the nourishment of the spirit of the world, it probably would not take long before the raging river's power was greatly depleted. If it was not replenished, it would probably only be able to continue struggling at death's door with vitality. After explaining the matter clearly, Lu Yun left and continued to repair the 1 mountain and 9 peaks. Although the 1 mountain and 9 peaks were completely new, the sword marks left behind back then were still unable to be completely repaired. That was by Jian's all-out attack. It could be said that he had directly cut off the fate in the mountain. It was not easy to restore it. Xiao Yang was not in a hurry to go out and continued to stabilize his realm. He did not know when he would break through to rank 7, so it was right to lay a good foundation now. Once there was a need, he could naturally break through without any scruples. If he continued to ignore it, it would probably leave behind future troubles. During the period of time when Xiao Yang was drunk, the guests from the other 3 realms also woke up one after another and left one after another. Of course, there were also people who were curious about the wonders of the 1 mountain and 9 peaks and the raging river, so they went to take a look before leaving. Many people sighed in amazement when they saw the magnificent raging river. No wonder Xiao Yang valued this blessed land. It was truly a work of art that excelled the heavens. After learning that the guests had left one after another, Xiao Yang did not care about these anymore and cultivated in seclusion. These few days, Xiao Yin also came out of seclusion. Xiao Yang casually mentioned a few things. He did not expect that this girl's talent was really not bad. She immediately continued to cultivate in seclusion and broke through 2 realms in a day. This speed could be said to be shocking. Xiao Yin was Lil Man's younger sister, so she could also be considered Xiao Yang's younger sister. Therefore, he did not stand on ceremony and guided as much as he could. It was not a big deal, regardless of whether it was emotional or reasonable. He treated these things as there was nothing to delay. These girls' growth speed was not slow. It was a pity that they were born in the wrong era, in an era where geniuses were everywhere, coupled with them standing aloof from worldly affairs. Their reputation was not prominent. The main reason was still that Xiao Yang's group of 3 had overshadowed everyone's limelight. Suddenly, Xiao Yang frowned and looked at the sky. He sensed that someone was coming. Chapter 29-24. After the other party entered the flowing cloud realm, he directly came to the side of the raging river. He stopped there and did not move forward, as if there was something he was interested in. Of course, what attracted Xiao Yang's attention was the other party's realm, 7th level martial emperor. With such strength, how could Xiao Yang not be careful? If such a person wanted to cause trouble, there would be very few people in the flowing cloud realm who could stop him. Once the battle started, the consequences would be extremely terrifying. With all these factors, how could Xiao Yang not be careful? Fortunately, the other party stopped, which was a sign of understanding the rules. Otherwise, a great battle would be inevitable. However, because they had not met yet, it was not clear whether the other party was a friend or a foe. In the next moment, Xiao Yang's figure flashed, and he went to the raging river. What was the other party's purpose for coming, and what the situation was, he would naturally be able to find out after investigating. At this moment, Xiao Yang's heart was heavy. He did not know why the other party had come. However, looking at the 7th level martial emperor, it was enough to explain many problems. If such a powerful person was provoked, it would not be good news. Moreover, this was the territory of Drift Cloud Dimension. Once a battle broke out, countless innocents would be affected. In fact, Xiaoyang also had a guess in his heart. It was very likely that the person who came was the sect behind Ming Jun, who came to seek revenge. However, this was somewhat unreasonable. After all, the old man in the linen robe was also a 7th-level martial emperor. Didn't he still lose to him? In this way, there was not much meaning for the other party to send such a person over. The more he thought about it, the more uncertain Xiaoyang's heart was. The identity of the person who came was so confusing. Because the other party's realm was not low, Xiaoyang did not dare to use his divine ability to spy on him. If he angered him, the consequences would be very terrible. The other party had not done anything so far. This could be considered a blessing in the misfortune, so he did not have to bear too much pressure. When Xiaoyang arrived at the raging river, he saw Chu Taiyin and the man looking at each other across the river. They were also discussing something, but from their tone, there wasn't any smell of gunpowder. Perhaps the situation wasn't as bad as they imagined. If they were friends, that would naturally be the best. If they were enemies, then the situation would not be good. When Xiaoyang got closer and saw the person's face, he couldn't help but be shocked. He was very surprised by the person who came. He had never imagined that this person would actually take the initiative to come to the flowing cloud world. Why did this person come to the flowing cloud world? For a time, there were many doubts in his heart. Xiaoyang's state of mind quickly changed as he carefully pondered. Clan Lord Xiao, you're quite generous to move the furious river here. The youth in white cupped his fist and smiled. The white-clothed youth was none other than the new patriarch of the profound dragon tribe in the Myriad Beast realm. He was also the strongest person in the Myriad Beast realm, Xing Tian. Now that Xing Tian had broken through again, reaching the 7th level, one could see how fast he was progressing. Moreover, why did Xing Tian come to visit the flowing cloud world at this time? Previously, they were in a situation where they would fight to the death. Now that he came, could it be that he wanted to take revenge after breaking through? Or could it be that he had other plans? Xiaoyang didn't have an answer in his heart. At the same time, he was somewhat worried. This Xing Tian wasn't simple. But fortunately, Xing Tian was a righteous person. Back then, he used tricks to force Xiaoyang to fight. After losing, he retreated as promised and didn't let his subordinates invade the flowing cloud world. Fellow Xing Tian, how did you find the time to come to the flowing cloud world today? Xiaoyang asked with a smile. At the same time, Xiaoyang had already prepared himself. If Xing Tian had other plans, then a battle between them would be unavoidable. But the other party really didn't reveal anything, which made it difficult for others to figure out what was going on. This made people feel the most uncomfortable. It was always difficult to know what the other party was thinking. For a moment, Xiaoyang felt a headache coming on. If this dragged on, he was afraid that even he would be depressed. But now that the flowing cloud world was a little fragile, Xiaoyang had to be more careful. He didn't dare to make any mistakes. At this moment, Chu Taiyin's body trembled subconsciously. He had also heard of Xing Tian's reputation. He was the strongest person in the Wanshou world. Although he lost to Xiaoyang, his strength and scheming were not to be underestimated. It could be said that if he hadn't met a freak like Xiaoyang, he would have dominated a region after obtaining the horned dragon's inheritance. But fate played a trick on people. Even if he had obtained a heaven-shaking opportunity and could dominate several worlds. But when the Four-Realm Alliance was promoted, it brought with it a few more powerful geniuses. Although now they had the potential to catch up, Chu Taiyin was still worried. Such an opponent was very difficult to deal with. Now that he seemed to have come alone, he didn't know what kind of backup plan he had. Chu Taiyin also believed that Xiaoyang could handle it. But in the chaos, many people would suffer. The chaos this time might even be more terrifying than the previous one. If I say I'm here as a guest, you definitely won't believe me. Xing Tian smiled. Xiaoyang also nodded solemnly. He did not have any good karma with the Wanshou realm. In fact, he even had quite a bit of enmity with Xingtian. Although the atmosphere in the Wanshou world was different, it couldn't be easily determined. When Xingtian saw that Xiaoyang had admitted it without any courtesy, he really didn't know what to say. Then I'll show you some sincerity. Xingtian smiled. As soon as he said that, Xiaoyang immediately became interested. What is this so-called sincerity? Tell me. Xiaoyang said in a deep voice. What was Xingtian selling in his gourd? It was obvious once he opened it. However, he had never let down his guard. This was an extremely dangerous person, so he had to be on his guard. Chu Taiyin stood aside. At the same time, he felt very helpless. These few days, he hadn't been able to communicate with the spirit of the raging river. If a war really broke out, he really couldn't help much. As such, they could only watch helplessly. The defense of the Western Front had been built, but it couldn't be put into use. This was very uncomfortable. He had also heard of how powerful the raging river was. Even Xiaoyang and the other two almost died. For example, when I came, I didn't bother with blind left and blind right. I didn't mention anything to anyone. Xingtian said. As soon as he said that, Xiaoyang's face turned ugly. Chapter 29-25. Right now, Xiaoyang's expression was very ugly. Left blind and right blind were the spies he had planted in the Wanshou realm. Of course, he did this for the peace of the flowing cloud realm. Now that Xingtian had brought it up, he must have figured out something. Xingtian was different. He had always been resourceful, and some tricks might be able to fool him for a while. But as long as he came back to his senses and thought carefully, many problems would naturally be solved. Speaking of which, the southeastern part of the Wanshou realm was in a mess, and the lower three tribes were all destroyed. However, in the chaos, the Blue Wolf tribe rose rapidly, and Left Blind and Right Blind both broke through to the 5th level martial emperor. If there was nothing fishy, how could they grow so quickly? Moreover, Xiaoyang's methods were very sharp, and it could be said that he had calculated everything. Left Blind and Right Blind could return safely. This was a little ridiculous. After thinking about these things, many problems naturally began to come to light, and it was no longer a big problem. Xingtian, on the other hand, had an indifferent look on his face. Perhaps this information was of no use to him. Of course, Xingtian also knew that after the Wanshou realm could not invade, Xiaoyang did not continue to conquer and chose to go to the Inflame realm for revenge. They did not want to take the initiative to invade, and they only wanted peace. In this way, why did they have to make such a big fuss? I wonder if this sincerity is enough? Xingtian smiled. Xiaoyang nodded and said, Of course it is enough. Chu Taiyin felt a little confused. He knew nothing about the arrangements in the Wanshou realm. However, looking at Xiao Gongzhu's apprehension, it wasn't hard to imagine that there were many unexplainable secrets behind this. Then, Xingtian took a step forward and easily crossed the raging river. You don't come without a reason. I think you are not just here to be a guest, Xiaoyang said in a low voice. If he did not know the real purpose of Xingtian's visit, Xiaoyang would never be at ease. Once he entered the flowing cloud realm, he would be like a ticking time bomb that would explode at any moment, causing a large area of damage. Moreover, if Xingtian came to spy on them and use them to formulate a battle plan, it would be even more terrifying. Now that Xingtian had completely calmed down, if he wanted to scheme something, it definitely wouldn't be that simple. How could Xiaoyang not be prepared for such a situation? Xingtian's level of danger was extremely high. If they were not careful, they could cause a huge mess. Looks like you're very worried about your own world. If you overdo it, it will become your weakness. Xingtian helplessly shook his head and said, As the saying goes, concern leads to confusion. It was precisely because Xiaoyang was overly concerned about his own world and appeared to be somewhat urgent that this would become his weakness. In the future, if there was someone who could control him, Xiaoyang would only be able to wait for his death. Xiaoyang frowned slightly. Now that Xing Tian was telling him all this, it was really thought-provoking. What was he thinking? I'm different from all of you. Xiao Yang let out a long sigh and said, Xing Tian didn't refute this. He was well aware of this. You're indeed different. Then I'll tell you the purpose of my visit. I want to invite you to go out and train with me. Xing Tian said in a deep voice. Xiao Yang was shocked when he heard this. He looked at Xing Tian with a bit of doubt in his eyes. With regards to such an invitation, he was still somewhat unsure and unable to accept it. Or was Xing Tian planning to lure him away from the mountain and then let his subordinates invade the flowing cloud realm? However, the possibility of this was very small. Even if Xiao Yang left, there would still be experts guarding the four-realm alliance. Such an invitation was really a little abrupt. Although Xiao Yang had thought about going out to train after a while, he did not expect Xing Tian to take the initiative to invite him. I'm very curious about why. It's simple. We don't have any sect behind us to support us, so we have to rely on ourselves when we go out. But if we encounter an irresistible force, I'm afraid we can only wait for death. But it's different with you. With your means, we can still escape. Xing Tian said in a deep voice. In Xing Tian's view, they could look after each other if they went out together. Of course. He also valued the wonderful use of the mountain river map in Xiao Yang's hand. Once they encountered an irresistible force, they could escape at the first moment and not lose their lives. And I know more about the 3,000 worlds. I can be your tour guide for the time being. We can be considered to be mutually beneficial and take what we need. Xing Tian said in a deep voice. A cooperation with each other's needs was the most stable. At least this was the case in Xing Tian's view. If one party only asked and did not help, such an alliance would fall apart in a short time. In addition, because of their position, they were more sensitive on this point. The slightest problem could cause them to turn against each other and even fight. Xiao Yang nodded and said, This suggestion is not bad, but how can I be sure? Xing Tian shrugged helplessly. He knew that Xiao Yang wanted to confirm whether he was sincere in being a companion. This Xiao Gongzhu was a little too nervous about his own world, which was why he had so many scruples. Xing Tian did not mind and said, Clan leader Xiao, don't worry. You should trust me. At our level, we can't do those dirty tricks. Conquering other people's worlds to plunder their luck is too low a method. Hearing this, Xiao Yang laughed. In this case, Xing Tian's mentality had changed. He was no longer like before when he only wanted to achieve something. It was not strange. After Xing Tian obtained the Horned Dragon's inheritance and became the strongest person in the Wanshou world, his mentality and outlook naturally changed. Or it could be said that Xing Tian's mentality had changed after he obtained the inheritance and was no longer the same as before. I need to think about this, Xiao Yang said in a deep voice. Xing Tian nodded and said, No hurry. I'll walk around the flowing cloud world and see your great rivers and mountains. You can give me an answer after you've thought about it. Xing Tian was very carefree and did not urge him. Do you need me to arrange someone to guide and introduce you? Xiao Yang asked with a smile. Xing Tian was stunned for a moment, then nodded with a smile. Chapter 29-26. Xing Tian agreed very readily. From his point of view, agreeing would make Xiao Yang feel at ease. It would also reduce a lot of suspicion and trouble. It wasn't easy for them to become friends. Turning an enemy into a friend wasn't as easy as just saying. As a result, Xing Tian followed his master's wishes. He would do whatever Xiao Yang wanted him to do. Then, Xiao Yang arranged for Mu Yang to be the tour guide and take Xing Tian to tour the great rivers and mountains of the drifting cloud world. Master, is Xing Tian reliable? Chu Taiyin asked doubtfully. Xiao Yang shook his head helplessly. I'm not sure either. With that, Chu Taiyin also felt quite helpless. Now that even Xiao Yang couldn't figure out what Xing Tian was thinking, it was really difficult to say what Xing Tian was thinking. Currently, the flowing cloud world seemed to be calm and peaceful. Perhaps after Xing Tian's appearance, it would cause some waves again. However, Chu Taiying also hoped that Xing Tian had come with sincerity to invite Xiaoyang out for training and wouldn't cause any trouble. The strength of a 7th-level martial royal realm expert was terrifying. Once they fought, the damage caused would not be small. After Xiaoyang said a few words, he directly returned to North Light City. At the same time, he began to think about this matter. Right now, the drifting cloud world was in a state of peaceful development. There were no longer any powerful enemies surrounding it. So Xiaoyang couldn't stay here forever. Going out for training was something he had to do. He couldn't delay it. Then, Xiaoyang contacted the God Emperor and Li Fengmu separately. He also told them of his worries and requests. Very quickly, Xiaoyang received the God Emperor's reply. He told him to go out as he pleased. With him watching over the drifting cloud world, nothing would happen. With the God Emperor's promise, Xiaoyang naturally didn't hesitate. If something big really happened and the God Emperor was unable to come over to help, Xiaoyang could make use of the mountain river maps array formation to rush back as soon as possible. In fact, none of this was a problem. He was just a little hesitant in his heart. Soon after, Xiaoyang also began to check on some of the flowing cloud world's policies and fill in the gaps. If there were any shortcomings, he would make them correct. At the same time, Xiaoyang also told everyone that he was going to go out and train. He told Sun Dishing and Sun Yukai to be extra careful during this period and not to be careless. Naturally, Mu Yang and Chu Taiying could only take the lead in this matter. Although their current strength was still somewhat insufficient, it would be different once they refined their respective opportunities. Thinking of this, Xiaoyang felt much more gratified. This was all he could do for the flowing cloud world. As for how far this world could go, it would all depend on everyone's efforts. It was definitely not something that a single person could achieve. Occasionally, Xiaoyang would also observe his friend from another world, Xing Tian. After Xing Tian entered the flowing cloud realm, he was indeed very well behaved and did not violate any rules. Wherever Mu Yang took him, he would go. He did not throw a tantrum and was very kind. If they talked about cultivation, Xing Tian would purposely give him some pointers. Xing Tian had the right to be a teacher as well. Of course, this was Xing Tian's goodwill. He felt that if he wanted to work together with Xiaoyang, he would have to follow his rules. Seeing Xing Tian act like this, Xiaoyang felt much more at ease. As long as he did not cause any trouble, everything would be fine. In the next few days, Xiaoyang took care of some miscellaneous matters. Although these matters were relatively small, they still required Xiaoyang to personally take care of them. He could not shirk away from them. As the ruler of the world, the responsibilities on his shoulders were naturally not ordinary. Sometimes he had to take care of these trivial matters. After taking care of these matters, Xiaoyang went to the River of Fury. As he waved his hand, Xiaohua appeared from the mountain and river map. He floated above the River of Fury and looked very greedy. The last time, Xiaohua nearly swallowed the spirit of the River of Fury. Seeing the River of Fury again now, Xiaohua naturally found it somewhat hard to suppress his state of mind too. The spirit of the River of Fury seemed to have sensed Xiaohua's existence too. Immediately, the river water also became much more turbulent. Clearly, the River of Fury was very angry too, wishing to swallow the heavenly fire directly. But the disparity in strength between them became greater and greater. At this point, the River of Fury also completely did not have the confidence to challenge Xiaohua anymore. Chu Taiying looked at that high-rank heavenly fire and frowned slightly. He said in a solemn voice, "Leader Xiao, this is?" "Senior, don't panic. If the spirit of the River of Fury dares to do something detrimental to you or not listen to your orders, just let Xiaohua hammer it," Xiaoyang said with a faint smile. Chu Taiying smiled bitterly to no end. Immediately, he also understood that with that high-rank heavenly fire around, he would be much safer too. "Leader, Xiao has already decided to go out?" Chu Taiying said with a smile. Xiaoyang nodded his head. This decision, he naturally could not change it. Perhaps going out with Xing Tian could be considered an opportunity. If he could give an accurate introduction, it would be beneficial to him as well. If he could become friends with Xing Tian on this trip, it would be a wonderful thing too. Xiao Yang had left Xiaohua behind to let the River of Fury know that even if he left, there were still existences in the world that could restrict it. Moreover, Xiaohua's strength was now comparable to a Class 7 powerhouse. With him here, as long as they did not encounter an excessively powerful opponent, they could still put up a fight. Then I wish leader Xiao a victory in advance. When you return, you will be able to add another paradise to our drifting cloud world, Chu Taiyin said with a chuckle. Xiao Yang smiled helplessly. Chu Taiyin made him sound like a bandit, going around plundering paradise. Xiao Yang left after giving a few more instructions to the River of Fury. At the same time, he sent a message to Mu Yang, telling Xing Tian to wait for him in Borealis City so that they could go out together. After returning to his own courtyard, Xiao Yang asked Xiao Man to pack up and prepare to go out with him to see what the other worlds were like. Xiao Man was now a martial emperor expert, but she had not taken a single step out of the drifting cloud world. She had not even been to the God world or the Sword Heart world. After coming to the upper realm, she had been staying in the courtyard to cultivate. She wanted to become stronger so that she could go out with the young master next time. When Xiao Man found out that the young master was going to bring her out this time, she was instantly overjoyed. It had been a long time since they had gone out together to travel the world. Everything seemed to have changed, but nothing had changed. They could still travel together. Chapter 29-27. Chu Taiyin and Mu Yang watched as the flying ship left. It disappeared from their sight and even left the flowing cloud realm. Mu Yang rubbed his chin. He also wanted to go out and train, but it was a pity that Chu Taiyin couldn't fuse with the raging river. Chu Taiyin didn't want to leave the flowing cloud world either, because he felt that it was good enough for him to stay here. He didn't need to go out to find his Tao. It could be found in the raging river. However, it was easier said than done to capture it. During this time, he had tried his best to fuse with it, but all of his attempts ended in failure. Chu Taiyin felt very helpless about this. However, he firmly believed that he would be able to make the raging river cooperate with him after a long time. At the end of the day, their auras were quite similar, and they had a natural sense of intimacy. Now that the spirit of the raging river was also angry, it was easier said than done to make it change its mind. Chu Taiyin also knew that she had a long life ahead of her. She could slowly grind it in, and there would be a day when she would succeed. The two of them were once the top figures in the flowing cloud world. After chatting for a while, they went their own ways. In the boundless sea of stars, Xing Tian looked at the vast river of stars with a smile on his face. In the past 10 days, he had traveled through the entire flowing cloud world. At the same time, he felt many different cultures. In the end, Xing Tian had only been to the myriad beast world and the Yin Flame world. However, the two worlds were filled with benefits, but the flowing cloud world was different. He could feel the sincerity and passion between people. He could also see the cultivators who had gone through trials and tribulations together. Sometimes they would mock each other with vicious words, but they would all smile and treat it as a joke. Compared to the myriad beast realm, this atmosphere was truly like heaven. At the same time, Xing Tian saw the 9 peaks of the mountain that he didn't see during the battle in the Yin Flame world. It was indeed a magnificent sight. How exquisite was a naturally formed formation. Xiao Yang was indeed extraordinary. He could be said to be fighting against the entire world by himself. This strength and courage was enough to see what kind of person he was. It was very reassuring to have such a person as a companion. Xiao Yang was lying on a wrought-tin chair at the bow of the ship, which he had found at the last minute. This trip to the Milky Way was a long and boundless journey. Naturally, he had to enjoy himself. If he was always in a tense state, it would be too tiring. Xiao Man, on the other hand, acted like a real servant as she fanned herself beside Xiao Yang. Xing Tian glanced at him and laughed. This guy really knew how to enjoy life. No matter where they were, human cultivators were different from them. What shocked Xingtian even more was that Xiao Yang's maid had already reached the third-level martial royal realm. Although this level of cultivation was only a drop in the ocean in the vast world, it was still an existence that could dominate an area in any world. Do you have any plans for this trip? Xingtian asked with a smile. Xiao Yang shook his head and smiled. He naturally had a plan in his heart. Xingtian frowned slightly and then smiled. He knew that Xiao Yang was waiting for him to speak so that he could see if it was on the way. Then, Xingtian threw a map to Xiao Yang. This time, let's go to the world behind Ming Jun's sect, the Bright Curse World, to take a look, Xingtian said in a deep voice. When Xiao Yang heard this, he immediately nodded his head. He naturally had the same thoughts. If he did not go there to see the attitude of the sect behind Ming Jun, he naturally would not be at ease. After all, once a war broke out, they would be at an absolute disadvantage. If the other party did not care, it would be best if the matter was left unsettled. If the other party was still plotting something, then it would be hard to say. After finding out the situation, Xiao Yang could then continue to move forward with peace of mind. It was naturally impossible for him to turn a blind eye to such a potential danger. However, it was also the first time that Xiao Yang heard about the world where Ming Jun was from. He had never heard of this world before. He was really not clear about the general situation of the 3,000 middle worlds. Xingtian turned his head and glanced at him, then continued. With your character, I think you are not willing to let the flowing cloud world take any risks. So, you're still very concerned about the attitude of the other side. Xiao Yang did not deny it. It was natural for this to be the case. A protector of Ming Jun was already so powerful. Then, it was obvious how terrifying the sect behind him was. At least the strength of the Bright Curse world was still much stronger than the Yin Flame world. Otherwise, how could Ming Jun, as the next leader of the Assemble Fire Union, as well as the proud son of heaven of the Yin Flame realm and a person with destiny, go to the Bright Curse realm? With all these, one could roughly figure it out with a little thought. I have only heard some information about that side in the past. There is not much, Xingtian said frankly. Xiao Yang shrugged indifferently. Since they were already on the same boat now, at least they did not do anything that crossed the bottom line. That was tolerable. Moreover, the Wanshou world and the Yin Flame world had been at war for a long time. Presumably, they did not have the mind to pay attention to other worlds. Xiao Yang looked at the map that Xingtian gave him. They needed to go to the Yin Flame world this time. There was another world behind the Yin Flame world, but it was not marked. It must be information that the Wanshou world did not know. After that was the Bright Curse world. It was very far away. With the speed of their flying ship, it would be difficult to reach there without a few months. This map covered the world with the Wanshou world as the center. The distance between each world was also very far. It was just that the promotion of the Four Realm Alliance made them closer to the Wanshou world and the Yin Flame world. Is it only the Wanshou world that is like this? There are no disputes or wars in the other worlds. Xiao Yang suddenly thought of a question and asked. Xingtian nodded very seriously and said, There are few cultivators from the other worlds who come here. I am not sure. I think they will not easily start a war between them. After all, with the way you human cultivators think, occupying land by force is not smart. Xiao Yang smiled bitterly as well. Xingtian was really someone who could say anything, but this was nothing. They were just being honest. Do you have any other purpose for going to the Bright Curse world? Xiao Yang frowned and said in a low voice. Xingtian came a little abruptly, and he directly pointed to the Bright Curse world. This was thought-provoking. Chapter 29-28. When Xingtian heard that, a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. He turned to look at Xiao Yang. Sure enough, there were some things that could not be hidden from him. They were all very smart. From some small details, it was enough to discover that many things were not that simple. If they did not have a purpose, how could they wander around casually? Therefore, There were many things here that couldn't be decided so easily. I heard that there is a secret method in the bright curse boundary that can resurrect the dead, Xing Tian said in a deep voice. As soon as this was said, Xiaoyang could not help but frown. Such a secret technique was truly frightening. Although Ming Jun is not from the bright curse boundary, it is impossible for his sect to not have any backup plans when facing such a disciple. Therefore, I suspect that Ming Jun is very likely to have been reborn, Xing Tian said with a hint of anticipation in his words. As soon as this was said, Xiaoyang's eyes could not help but freeze. If Ming Jun really came back from the dead, it would definitely be a big problem. Why was there no movement from the bright curse boundary so far? Because they did not understand the situation, they could only calculate in their hearts and could not come up with a specific idea. Because there was no specific information, they could only speculate in their hearts. So, Xiaoyang asked with a frown, could it be that there was some dispute between Xing Tian and Ming Jun? So, Xing Tian would definitely go to the bright curse boundary? In the past, when he fought with me, Ming Jun, on the battlefield, we only won and lost. But after I carefully calculated it, I still lost to him by a small amount. As Xing Tian spoke, the corners of his mouth revealed a trace of a bitter smile. It was just that later on, Ming Jun went to the bright curse boundary. No one in the younger generation could suppress Xing Tian anymore, so his reputation rose directly. Even later on, there were many people who felt that Ming Jun was not as good as Xing Tian. However, Xing Tian was very clear that he had lost this round, so he had to get back at him. Otherwise, how could he be at ease? Xiaoyang was stunned for a moment. He did not expect Xing Tian to be brooding over this small loss. Or could it be that he had other plans in his heart? Geniuses had always been proud, arrogant, and competitive. Sometimes a small victory or defeat that they might not care about would be infinitely magnified in their hearts. In the end, it would even become an incomparably terrifying existence. Flaws in one's Tao heart, all sorts of things were possible. Looks like you still have to get back those 2 losses from me in the future, Xiaoyang asked with a smile. Xing Tian had lost both the Central Region scheme and the battle with the profound dragon tribe. Xing Tian nodded without hesitation. A loss was a loss. He could afford to lose, and he dared to admit it. When the time was right, he would win it back. What harm was there in that? At this moment, Xiaoyang was speechless. It seemed like this Xing Tian was rather decent. Since he dared to admit it, that was for the best. This meant that the other party didn't have any tricks up their sleeves. In that case, it was best to be straightforward. Although Xiaoyang was also good at scheming, it was still too tiring for him. Now, you are 1 level higher than me, Xiaoyang said with a smile. Xing Tian shook his head and said, the last time I lost, I was also 1 level higher than you. It wasn't that Xing Tian hadn't thought about it before, but he knew very well that if he fought again, he had to win. If he were to lose, a crack would appear in his mental state because of this. When that happened, the consequences would be unpredictable. Without absolute confidence, I will never fight you, Xing Tian took a deep breath and said. In Xing Tian's opinion, during this trip to the bright curse boundary, Xiaoyang would inevitably clash with the sect behind Ming Jun. At that time, one would only need a single glance to know exactly how terrifying this person's battle prowess would be. Therefore, there was no need to be anxious now. He just needed to wait and see. Maybe you will never have the chance in the future, Xiaoyang said with a smile. Xing Tian didn't mind and said, the world is unpredictable. No one can say for sure. Xing Tian also had his own trump card. He felt that the horned dragon's inheritance he received was incomplete. If he could comprehend more and become the king of beasts, there was a possibility that he could fight with Xiaoyang. But it was just a thought. When could it be realized? That remained to be seen. Thinking about this, Xing Tian could only sigh helplessly. Things were like this. How could it be easy to change? But he wouldn't give up. In fact, he became more and more determined. It was like an illusory goal, but he would continue to pursue it. That way he wouldn't stop. Later on, Xing Tian asked around for information about Xiaoyang. When he found out that Xiaoyang entered the beast realm, he was only a 3rd-level martial king. Now he was a 6th-level martial king. How many years had it been? The speed of his growth could be said to make people flabbergasted. It was as if he was a heaven-sent genius, something that others could only look at but could not reach. Thinking about this, Xing Tian had a rough estimate. "That is true. But I hope we can be friends then," Xiaoyang exclaimed. One had to admit that Xing Tian's character wasn't bad. To be friends with someone like him was a good choice. However, because of their different standpoints, it was difficult for them to become true friends with each other. Xing Tian smiled faintly. How could something like this be so easy to predict? Their standpoints were ultimately different. Perhaps it was because they each had their own needs that they decided to travel together. But who could say for sure what would happen in the future? Perhaps, because of the conflicts between the worlds, they would fall into a situation where they would fight to the death. There were all sorts of possibilities. Xiaoyang stood up and looked at the vast sea of stars. At the same time, he was thinking about many things. Xiao Man obediently stood to the side and followed behind the young master. Feeling that it was almost time for lunch, Xiao Man turned and entered the room. Soon, the fragrance of food wafted out. After smelling the fragrance, Xing Tian's eyebrows twitched. Fellow cultivator Xiao is lucky to have such a considerate maid. You can enjoy this boring journey. Xing Tian smiled. Xiaoyang waved his hand indifferently and said, "Xiao Man is my sister. It's just that this girl's thoughts are deeply ingrained. She can't change it in a short time." Xing Tian was stunned for a moment. Then he smiled and nodded. Xing Tian had some understanding of the nature of the person standing beside him. What he said was the truth. Perhaps that was why his charm was so terrifying that people couldn't help but approach him.